Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. Just to remind everyone, if you are on the panel and aren't speaking, we ask that you could please mute yourself and turn off your video if you're not speaking. If you have any questions for our panel, please feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A function. We'd actually prefer the Q&A function for the questions. And the chat functions you can use if you have any other issues. You can directly message me or anyone else. We are going to get started here in a second. Colin, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I think we are ready. Just a reminder that the information we're about to go through with the Plastic Pollution Initiative launch is available on our website, including the one-pager on this effort. So you can go there. It's under the programs area in the clean water section. And we're very excited about this piece and the partnerships and work that has gone into it. We think will be transformative. To hear more about that, I'll hand it off to Mayor Bob Gallagher, our co-chair, mayor of Bettendorf, Iowa.
Thank you, Colin, and good afternoon to everybody. Welcome back to the MRCTI Capitol meeting. If you're just joining us, we've had a very influential set of discussions last night and this morning, including the White House, the Senate, the House, FEMA, and the river cruising industry. We're now going to feature a much interactive opportunity for our cities with the launch of a new partnership to lift our plastic waste reduction campaign, which began at our 2018 annual meeting right here in the Quad Cities. Since then, we've been working to develop an approach to managing plastic waste in a way all of our cities and residents of the corridor can participate. Overseeing today's launch and the project as a whole for the MRCTI is Jennifer Wendt. She is our plastic waste campaign manager. Thank you, Jenny, for your hard work on this project, and we really appreciate seeing you. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you, Mayor Gallagher. I appreciate that.
Good to see you.
In September 2018, mayors from the Mississippi River announced a commitment with state legislators and companies on an effort to reduce plastic waste in the Mississippi River Valley by calling on government and organizations to reduce their plastic waste. This commitment was born out of a need for a collaborative effort to tackle this immense challenge. As cities across the country grapple with plastic waste littering their community and waterways, the Mississippi River cities see it tenfold. Because the Mississippi River is a drainage system for 40% of the continental U.S., plastic litter travels through storm drains and tributaries to the Mississippi River. As the river ebbs and flows, plastic waste is either left behind in our river cities or makes its way to the Gulf and to the ocean. The Mississippi River City mayors knew they needed to take action. The Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative was designed to address this problem. MRCTI has joined forces with the United Nations Environment Program, the University of Georgia, the National Geographic Society, and local governments, organizations, and the education community to make this initiative a reality. This initiative is beginning in 3 pilot cities along the Mississippi River: Baton Rouge, Louisiana, St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Paul, Minnesota, representing the lower, the middle, and the upper river to create a plastic pollution map to determine what, where, and how plastic waste is making its way to our river. Mayor Carter of St. Paul, Minnesota, Mayor KREWSON of St. Louis, Missouri, and Mayor Broome of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, made the commitment to support this initiative in their respective cities. Over 100 organizations are partners on this initiative, including multiple Rotary clubs and the Mississippi River Network's national program, One Mississippi, which has a community of 20,000 river citizens and will connect people to partner events in the 3 cities. We would like to share with you a short video presenting this initiative.
The Mississippi River flows over 2,000 miles through the heartland of America, from its headwaters in Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico. This river is the watershed for 32 states, and we are impacting it with our actions. The litter that we produce from coffee cups to masks or plastic bags can end up in the environment, making their way to our rivers and then into the oceans. Globally, this results in about a dump truck's worth of plastic entering our ocean every minute. The Mississippi River drains 40% of the continental United States, creating a conduit for our litter to reach the Gulf of Mexico. In September 2018, the mayors of the Mississippi River made a commitment to reduce plastic waste in the Mississippi River Valley. To support that commitment, the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative is working with volunteer citizen scientists, local communities, associations, and researchers to collect data to understand the magnitude of the plastics problem along the Mississippi River. Scientists need data on what's ending up in the environment so that we can use that information to address this important environmental problem. And you can be a part of the solution. Download the free Marine Debris Tracker app and choose the list entitled MRCTI to collect data on what plastic pollution looks like in your community. The data will be analyzed to help us understand the problem, which then leads to solutions that will help policymakers, businesses, and citizens alike take action. Join us today to ensure a clean river and clean seas for all.
Here to introduce our partners and discuss the launch of this initiative is Theresa Leonardo, Director of Citizen Science and Special Projects with the National Geographic Society. Go ahead, Theresa.
Thank you, Jenny. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the National Geographic Society, I'm so pleased to be with you here today to launch this important initiative to reduce plastic waste in the Mississippi River Valley. As that video did a fantastic job of highlighting, plastic pollution is one of the most serious environmental challenges our planet is facing. National Geographic believes that science and education have the power to illuminate and inspire. Through the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative, we're working with educators along the Mississippi who will engage their students in citizen science to help generate the first ever snapshot of plastic pollution along the river. We hope to inspire young leaders to have a deeper appreciation and understanding of how society both relies on and impacts the natural world. At National Geographic, we also believe in the power of storytelling, of finding and highlighting inspirational stories that will transform understanding and inspire action to protect our planet. We believe this initiative has the potential to inspire cities and communities elsewhere in the world to take on the massive challenge of plastic waste. So thank you to all of the mayors here today for your commitment and leadership on this important issue. Our session today will feature remarks from key partners in this important initiative, including the United Nations Environment Program and the University of Georgia, as well as several mayors who represent cities along the Mississippi where the pilot activities will be conducted. After everyone's remarks, we should have about 15 minutes or so for questions and answers. And before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to go over the process for submitting questions. First, and this was said earlier, please submit your questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen rather than the chat. Our team will select questions which I'll read and direct to the appropriate panelists. You can begin submitting your questions at any point and as soon as the discussion begins. If your question is for a specific panelist, please indicate that when you submit it. And please also include your full name and organizational affiliation for every question you submit. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. And finally, the session is being recorded and we will share details on how to access the recording with all participants after the session. And now I'm so pleased to begin introducing our panel. Our first speaker is Barbara Hendry, who is the Regional Director for North America for the UN Environment Program. Barbara.
Thanks so much, Theresa, and hello, everyone. I want to start by thanking MRCTI for inviting us to co-launch this project during your annual Capitol meeting. As Theresa mentioned, I'm the North America Director for the UN Environment Program. For those of you that don't know us, we're the lead agency within the UN system for addressing environmental challenges worldwide. We have been very fruitfully partnering with MRCTI for some years now, and it's been a fantastic and I think impactful relationship. One of the things we did together was celebrate World Environment Day in 2018 around the theme that year of tackling plastic pollution. And of course, as we know, in that same year, mayors and state legislators from the Mississippi River Valley made a groundbreaking political commitment to reduce the amount of plastic waste flowing into the river valley. And since that commitment was made, we have been working with MRCTI and other partners to see how can we help turn that into a reality. So I'm thrilled today to be part of the formal launch of this initiative, which is aimed at harnessing the power of ordinary people to become citizen scientists in their communities along the river to help us generate data for a plastic pollution map. And I know we're going to hear more about this map from our next distinguished speaker, but what I want to say here is that if you can't measure a problem, if you can't assess a problem, it's very difficult to understand how to solve a problem. So the idea is that this plastic pollution map will help provide data on where the plastic is along the river valley, where it's coming from, and to give us clues about how to tackle it and reduce it. Why is this important? Plastic pollution is one of the premier environmental crises of our time. It's literally choking our oceans as well as our landscapes. Some of you may not know, but approximately half of our atmospheric oxygen is actually generated by our oceans. So if we suffocate our oceans, we suffocate ourselves. And yet every year, around 8 million tons of plastic enter the ocean. Most of that originates from land-based sources, including coastlines and major rivers like the Mississippi. The vast majority of this plastic waste, sad to say, about 80% of it is comprised of products or packaging that we use for perhaps 2 minutes and then throw away, but it remains in our environment pretty much forever. So we really have to get a grip on this problem. We have to bend the rising curve of production of single-use plastic globally, and we have to interrupt its journey as waste into our rivers and from there into our oceans. That's why the UN Environment Program is looking at plastic in river and freshwater systems, as well as oceans. One of the things, the important things we're doing is working to develop a global database, as well as guidelines on monitoring plastic pollution in freshwater systems so that we can help tackle the problem from the source. And data is key in this. That's where the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative comes in. The work that we will do together, gathering data on plastic along the river, will be part of our global monitoring system. And indeed, we hope it will be one of the early pilots for how this kind of monitoring can be done in partnership with local communities. This data will generate a plastic pollution map, and it will give us actionable information about plastic waste concentrations in specific areas so that policymakers, businesses, and ordinary citizens can then work together to try and tackle those issues. This is really practical action, and we're so thrilled to be working with MRCTI, the National Geographic Society, and the University of Georgia to make it a reality. The Mississippi River is one of the world's great waterways, and what we do here, together with all of you, we hope will not only help cities and towns along the river, but provide an example globally of what can be done by ordinary people to address the crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I would now like to introduce Dr. Jenna Jambeck, Distinguished Professor of Environmental Engineering at University of Georgia and a National Geographic Fellow. Jenna also led the National Geographic's Sea to Source Ganges River Expedition in 2019. Jenna.
Thanks, Theresa. First of all, I'd also like to thank MRCTI and UNEP North America for bringing us onto this project. It's truly an honor to work with the mayors and communities along the Mississippi River Having grown up in the small town of Pine City, Minnesota on the Snake River, which is a tributary to the Mississippi, this project is near and dear to my heart. Many people around the world did take action when our research showed that about a dump truck of plastic was reaching the ocean every minute. And I think the commitment by MRCTI and the work of the UN Environment Program illustrate this action. But we really need an all hands on deck approach to address this issue both locally and globally. Research I participated in last year showed that even with the efforts that have been made since 2015, if we don't get more aggressive with our actions, then at least 20 million metric tons of plastic can reach our aquatic systems globally every year. So while cleanups have been occurring for decades and will need to continue, we're now really looking upstream. Can we prevent plastic from reaching our environment in the first place? And turning off the tap of plastic pollution means using data from on the ground as one way to engage everyone who needs to be at the table. In this project, data is critical to a snapshot of the baseline of plastic in the environment along the Mississippi, as well as informing us about where the most frequent items found and how can they be traced back to the source. And then, how does all this data get on a collaborative map? Well, first we're going to use a tool, one that is free and open to everyone to use. It's the first mobile app to allow anyone in the world to log a type and location of litter items anywhere they're found. The mobile app is freely available on both iPhone and Android, and the data collected is open access, which means anyone can access it on the Debris Tracker website at any time. Here's how it'll work. First, make sure you download the Marine Debris Tracker mobile app. Again, free to everyone in all of the app stores. And then we have made a Mississippi River field guide. You can access this guide. It's specifically developed for this program on the various partner websites like UNEP and Debris Tracker. The guide provides detailed information on how to use the app, how to collect data easily and safely for the program. Data collection will focus on three areas: debris in communities, floating in the river, and in accumulation zones. While the app is easy to use and many people have used it independently, we're offering webinars this month to find out more about how to use it to contribute data specifically for this project. We encourage everyone to attend and engage with their fellow Mississippi River trackers. After data is logged during the tracking and cleanup events, it's submitted to the shared global database where it then will appear publicly on the available map. Over 3 million items have been submitted around the world since Debris Tracker was launched. With community-based data collection, the more data, the more representative it is. Mayors can use the data to bring stakeholders together to have conversations about what kind of interventions make sense for their town. And community members can use the data to bring people together to discuss the issue and discuss what kinds of actions they want to take. Everyone can access their own data and explore other data at debristracker.org/data. The burden of plastic pollution falls on our local communities, and we hope that all can be empowered by this data to inform upstream interventions to prevent it. Actions taken make a difference to the mighty Mississippi River, connecting us all through the heartland of the U.S. and to our global ocean. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. And we're now honored to have remarks from 3 mayors of cities that will be hosting the pilots that will take place next month. And I would first like to introduce the mayor of St. Paul, Melvin Carter.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thank you for this exciting event today where we can announce this initiative. St. Paul is very excited to be a pilot city for the MRCTI Plastic Pollution Initiative launching today. Here in the upper Mississippi River, we're dependent on clean fresh water for drinking supply, for manufacturing, and for tourism. In fact, tourism is the second largest industry on the Mississippi River and is a major draw to our area as long as the water is clean and not compromised by plastic waste. So having this app that makes everyone a citizen scientist, helping to clean up the watershed and collect valuable data on where the most waste is and what type will inform our own city ordinances and plans to enact limits on the types of plastics that are the most prevalent and harmful to our environment. I want to thank the Great River Passage, the Friends of the Mississippi River, and the Fresh Water Society for being a part of this for our city. You know, St. Paul, we're very proud of being the capital city of our headwater state. We're very proud of boasting more river frontage on the Mississippi River than any other American city. partnership that's included our Parks and Recreation and Public Works departments, nonprofit organizations, Conservation Corps of Minnesota, and a number of groups of folks coming together to build this big vision together and move this forward. As the capital city and the headwater state, and I'm home distance learning with actually she's 1 today, so it's her birthday. So I think wanted you guys to know that. I've got my birthday hat and everything, but we take it seriously, our responsibility to send the Mississippi River to the rest of the country. And we see this as an example of the river approach we aspire to, one of local impact, but an acknowledgement of our global responsibility. So we're going to launch this initiative with our annual citywide spring cleanup event, where along with the city and partner organizations, thousands of residents will contribute to clean up their local parks and neighborhoods, and particularly doing that cleanup along the river.
Sure. Well, we do have ambitions for this initiative. We hope that once we have tested the waters in our pilot cities and demonstrated the case that this can work and it can generate valuable data, that we can expand this effort next year to many, many more cities and towns along the Mississippi River. Of course, any city can get involved. We do have a website you can go to and see the information there. We can put it in the chat room so that everybody can see it. We want to encourage school groups, citizens groups, as many stakeholders as we can to go out and safely get this data. We have a concentrated window that we're looking at for this initiative in April, but of course we can continue to populate this map at any time. So really, it's a question of getting in touch, signing up. We have bespoke training that the University of Georgia is providing. It's a very simple, robust scientific protocol that people get trained in and then can go out singly or in groups. I just want to add that we really are putting a big emphasis on safety at this particular moment. We need to be very COVID safe in this activity. We want to make sure that people are masked, are practicing social distancing and taking all the necessary precautions. But Dr. Jambeck might want to add something in terms of what we can offer to cities.
Thanks, Barb. I think you covered it pretty much everything. I guess just realizing that, with the app being freely available to anyone, it does mean that, anyone, anywhere along the Mississippi, and of course, anywhere in the world can use this to collect data. In fact, here in Georgia, they're talking about creating cleanups around Earth Day, which will be, of course, there will be people doing things in other places. So it's always available. And as I said, the more data, the better. But in terms of the campaign, the focus is on these 3 cities.
Great, thank you both. Our next question will be for Mayor KREWSON. This is from Jonathan All of St. Louis Public Radio. Mayor KREWSON, after the data starts coming in from this pilot program, what kind of local ordinances or laws do you think could be suggested? And do you think there will be public acceptance of these? I believe you're on mute.
And that was my best answer. No, thank you, Jonathan, for that question. It's a good question. There have been some efforts at the local level to ban plastic bags, for example. The state has responded, and this was a few years ago, the state responded by preempting us for doing that. There have been some folks who have thought about some sort of deposit on plastic bottles and that sort of thing. I think the whole effort, the recycling effort, has been set back a bit by and not that recycling is the only thing you can do with this, but recycling would at least not have it thrown on the ground. But it's been set back a bit by what's going on around the world in terms of the market for recycling, but also by COVID, you know, where we used to not, we all took our bags to the grocery store, at least when we could remember. And, you know, you can't at this point in time take your own reusable bags. So I think that, you know, building awareness of the problem, and there are some good videos and that sort of thing out there, it will help people. But just the amount of littering, I guess I'll call it, maybe it's even more than that we have is really troublesome, and it ultimately does end up in our waterways, whether it's in the Mississippi, the Missouri, Illinois, and ultimately in New Orleans. So I think there's various levels of acceptance of any sort of efforts, legislative efforts.
Thank you. And there was a related question from Haley Parker from the New Orleans Times-Picayune Advocate. I'm going to direct this part to Dr. Jambeck. How has the lack of data affected attempts to enact policies more generally?
So I think we've seen this sort of globally with this issue as well. And I think 5-6 years ago, even, a lot of the stories around this were anecdotal. And so really sort of adding data and robust science to this issue means that a lot of people have taken action. One thing I just wanted to express sort of as a local issue is our local community has reached out to us for specifically marine debris tracker data that's been collected here in Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, because same thing as Mayor KREWSON just said, the commission wants to undertake discussion of a plastic bag tax or ban, and want this data to, you know, see how many have ended up in the environment and that people have reported. So I think, again, those discussions are just starting here, but that data is important to inform those kind of discussions as one example.
Great, thank you, Jenna. And we have another question here. This is from Josh Butner of Market to Market Iowa PBS, asking whether there's any images available of the plastic pollution backed up into the tributary of the Mississippi River that Mayor KREWSON mentioned. Mayor KREWSON, maybe that's best for you.
You know, there probably are some pictures of that. I don't have them, you know, available right now, but this was, I guess it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And so, you know, we might be able to find some of those for you.
Okay, great. And our next question, also from Haley Parker from the Times-Picayune Advocate. Has progress been made on the 2018 goal of reducing plastic waste by 20% by 2020? And who would like to, panelists can raise their hand for this one.
Theresa, I can add to that a little bit. This is Colin. This is Colin Wellenkamp. I'm the executive director of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. And what our mayors did in 2018 was they invited commitments from both the public and private sector to help reduce the plastic pollution content in the Mississippi River 20% by the end of 2020. Of course, that was long before COVID was even dreamt of. So that got in the way a little bit. But that launch back in 2018, we did have several corporate commitments from hotel and restaurant conglomerates, as well as Starbucks, Coca-Cola, all were moving in this direction and have made commitments since that got us closer to that, to contributing to that 20% factor. Now, moving forward, to really make this work at scale, we need the data that Jenna's talking about, Dr. Jambeck is referring to. We need to know, where is the plastic waste collecting the most in the corridor? What type of waste is it that makes up the most of it? And whose is it? A lot of times brand is discernible on this waste, depending on what it's gone through in the environment and how long it's been there. So all of that data will inform us on how we can work with companies to ensure that the plastic that they're using is types that really our municipal systems can take and reuse. That we're using plastic reusing plastic that can yield to a market for post-consumer waste purchase materials instead of just buying new plastic all the time. And then also finally work with our own cities to make our recycling and take back systems less leaky, adding resources, new bins, new education campaigns. We really need to make all of that work focused. And this data will enable us to do that and put the very limited number of resources that we have where it's going to have the most impact around the types of waste we find out there. Jennifer Wendt, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just add that, you know, we know that there are issues within cities, stormwater, solid waste management, those types of things. So having this data will definitely be able to guide those plans that cities are making. As far as the companies making commitments and that 20% by 2020 goal, many corporations have made commitments, but what we would like to see is specific actions that we can see a difference. So that's kind of why we moved onto this level where we can collect the data instead of just hearing the commitments and being glad. And I have no doubt that they're working hard on that, but this will really enforce that.
Great, thank you both. Our next question. So much of the focus on Mississippi River maintenance is related to barge traffic. Does that indirectly or directly add to plastic pollution and movement? And if panelists could raise their hand if they'd like to answer this one. Barbara?
Sorry, I'm raising my hand in an analog way. It just seemed easier. I don't frankly know the answer to this question, but my sense, and Dr. Jambeck is much more experienced on river systems than I am, is that a lot of it is the urban concentrations generating plastic waste, which then end up in landfill and find their way into the river and accumulate in the river. I'm not aware that barge traffic does, but that may be a particular feature that we need to come to understand. But Jenna, you may know more about this.
I think you're right. I mean, it remains to kind of be explored. I wonder if we will find, you know, that a certain type of item, and this is why it's so important that community members participate in this, because that local knowledge is really important to potentially, in terms of when we find something, oh, this maybe is coming from that activity. You know, from our work on the Ganges, I don't think, you know, besides finding some of that urban litter, we found that the fishing community there had no place to manage their nets, for example. So that was another industry, not necessarily related to our activity on land, but our activity on water that, of course, we found the data for, as we collected data, found that evidence and then was able to engage that sector. So that very well may happen here, and I guess the data will tell us.
Great, thank you both. And we're now going to go to a live question from Shelley Hartfield, if we can switch over to her.
Hi, thank you. I'm with American Queen Steamboat Company, and one of our big initiatives since 2018 has been plastic waste reduction, removing water bottles from our vessels and installing hydration stations. And I wanted to see if there's any way that we can get involved in this initiative as well with either our crew or our passengers, and make sure that they have access to the app and that they're looking out for it as we're cruising up and down the Mississippi. We would love to be able to join forces and help with this initiative.
Fantastic. I'm going to send this over to Barbara.
Yes, double thumbs up, and thanks Shelley for that. Absolutely. I mean, your clients and your crew are on the river all the time, so you're seeing a lot of what's happening, and you may notice patterns. You may see particular concentrations. We would love to have you join us. We can figure out how to tailor some of the use of the app to the fact that you are a little bit more mobile. I'm sure we can put our thinking caps on, but we would absolutely love to have you with us, and congratulations for the work that you're doing on your own ships. It's really example setting, and it's hugely important.
Terrific. Well, then I will try to get with you and see how we can move forward. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Great question, and really happy to have more partners involved. We're next going to go to a question from John Flesher of the AP. Do any parts of this initiative encourage businesses and individuals to also use less plastic? And let's, Barbara, would you be able to answer that?
Sure. I mean, I'll call on colleagues on the panel as well. I think, look, we hope it will do a bit of both, to be frank. The amount of plastic that is being produced, particularly this sort of single-use plastic that I spoke about that we kind of use for 15 seconds and throw away, but stays in our environment for millennium. We have got to think about how to reduce that. And if the initiative generates awareness and creates some consumer pressure to think about how can we find alternatives, fantastic. But also, we may come up with data, as I talked about, there may be specific concentrations that through a brand audit, we can see there are particular products that are really showing up with great frequency in particular areas. And then what we want to do is partner with some of the companies for whom those products are associated to see what can we do better together. Are there some things we can do to, let's say, understand whether recycling is a better option? What are the obstacles to recycling in that particular location that may be creating that concentration? How can we work with companies to think about alternatives? How can we indeed understand what the recycling capability is? It may be that we have to raise awareness of a sort of systemic gap in the recycling capability in certain parts of the Mississippi Valley that need to be addressed to tackle. So it's a bit of both. We need to look downstream, to use the analogy, at the waste, but we also need to look upstream because we're not going to just tackle it looking downstream.
Great, thank you. And Jenny, was there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I'm not sure how to take that handout. Yes, this is one example that I feel like is really tied to this. So the American Beverage Council has a Every Bottle Back program that Keurig, Dr. Pepper, Coca-Cola, and Pepsi are all involved in. And they really want to collect those bottles to use more recycled content. And that is what we found when we first started this initiative in 2018. A lot of these companies, their commitments were to use more recycled content in their bottles. But there, like Barb said, there's that disconnect. So, this is a great opportunity because we know that a lot of the materials that we find are plastic bottles, to connect with them and say, okay, how can we make that connection? How can we get, some of this material back to you? Or what can we do to increase your recycled content while reducing our plastic waste? So that's one example. And another one is, an app similar to this was used in a city in Europe. I'm not exactly sure where, but where they collected data and the data showed a particular product, a particular wrapper. And when that data became, public after the cleanup event and after the data was collected, the company that made that product decided to change their wrapper because it was such negative PR for them that they said, okay, we're going to take that plastic wrapper and make it paper from now on. So this is one great thing about having that data that can show, everybody sees it, and it really can encourage those businesses to make those decisions.
Great, thank you, Jenny. And now I'd like to go back to Mayor Carter and ask, could you tell us a little bit more about how plastic pollution in the Mississippi River affects the lives of people in your city?
Yeah, thank you for asking the question. I'm wrestling here, but I appreciate you guiding the question for us. I mean, listen, like I said before, we're the capital city of our headwaters, right? And one of the things I think that we are of our headwater state, and one of the things that I think that we are thinking about right now is how to recenter the river in our city. It's the reason we're a city in the first place, and so that means our opportunities to bring people to the river, to recreate along the river, to do economic development along the river, good, responsible economic development along the river. My wife is a healthcare provider, so I'm home changing diapers. Is all critical. And as I mentioned before, our river is our tourism is our #2 industry along the river. And so to the extent that we can keep it clean and have it be a enjoyable, aesthetically pleasing place to be, it's both a social engine, it's an environmental engine, it's a cultural and economic engine for our community as well. And so, our ability to take pride in our riverfront is critical. And intriguingly, one of the things that we're, I think, discovering as we go, one of the things we're go right now is the extent to which all of our communities center around some river lore, whether it's our African American community, our Hmong community, our Somali community. Rivers represent freedom. Rivers represent progress. Rivers represent forward movement for so many of our communities. So we're finding an opportunity to center storytelling as critical. We're finding an opportunity for our river to bring us together across cultures. But again, to your point, if when we get to that space, when we celebrate our river, it's full of plastics and it's eyesore, and it clearly looks like a place that we're either not taking good care of or is not a pleasing place to be, then it's going to take us backwards in that work instead of forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And the next generation that's sitting on your lap, really, we need to take care of the rivers for them. We're now going to move on to our final panelist.
So thank you for bearing with us. She wants the river clean now.
Yeah, we love her enthusiasm. So I'm now going to introduce our final panelist, the Mayor of Baton Rouge, Sharon Weston Broome, to deliver her remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Theresa. And, certainly Mayor Carter, I wholeheartedly agree, the next generation of leaders. And so that's why we've got to work on this river. I will tell you, Theresa, that my city is certainly looking forward to this work, and it is so very much needed. Much of the plastic waste and other floatables have the potential to collect near our area from the entire 31 state basin. And so plastic clogs our canals, our creeks, and backwater areas, leading to a buildup that is layered. And I really want to thank Rotary International for stepping up and organizing around our initiative by activating their membership. Baton Rouge Rotary is one of the largest clubs in the nation. I also would like to thank LSU and Southern University for their help. Also, our own Jenny, who's working tirelessly on this issue as well. I will tell you that one of my top priorities, certainly as co-chair of MRCTI, is this issue we're talking about right now because of its overall impact on our environment and certainly our quality of life. And so I look forward to moving this work down the road so we can see some tangible results that will empower all of our cities on the Mississippi River. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. And now I believe we're out of time, so I'm going to wrap up, and I'd like to again thank all 5 of our panelists for their inspirational remarks and their leadership in working together to combat plastic pollution. This is an incredibly complex problem, and complex problems require large and powerful partnerships and great commitment and dedication, and we have a terrific foundation for that here. This has been really inspirational, I think, for all of us. I'd also like to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today for the launch of this important initiative. And we're really excited to see how this continues to grow and flourish throughout the Mississippi River Valley. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Theresa. I'm not entirely sure we're out of time yet. Let me check in with our stage manager, Brant Thornton, to see if our senator is on. He may not be yet.
We do not have Senator Durbin yet. He is running a few minutes behind because of a meeting with the White House. His office sends his regrets, but he should be here at about 3:15.
And that's 2:15 Central.
2:15,
so don't worry. You don't have to wait an hour. Yeah, 2:15. So he's only a few minutes away. Theresa, if there's any more, if there's other lingering questions or issues or some things that folks didn't get to say, we do have some extra time while we wait for the senator to join us.
Great, that's fantastic. We will do a couple more questions then, and I will direct the next question to Jenna Jambeck. Could you tell us a little bit more about the process for recruiting volunteer citizen scientists to help with data collection?
Sure. For this, I want to acknowledge an awesome member of my team, Catherine Youngblood, who's the Citizen Science Director for Debris Tracker. And some of you who are going to be participating in this are going to hear from Catherine. She's helping to organize those webinars that I talked about. And those webinars are going to be more than training. We're going to have local groups within the community sort of present on work that they're doing. So they're going to be, like I said, sort of platforms to engage with fellow trackers all along the Mississippi River and hear sort of what's already been happening, which there's a lot already been happening. It's just this is sort of catalyzing, data collection along the whole river. And then there's great comms teams. So the UNEP comms team and is, sort of leading the way to getting the word out. And MRCTI, of course, has already, Jenny's been connecting with organization after organization. So many people are excited to join us. And so, to be honest, we're just trying to help organize and facilitate all we can for everyone who really wants to join. It's open to everyone. So.
Great, thank you, Jenna. And now we have a related question for Mayor Broome. It would be, this is from Haley Parker. It would be great to hear a bit more about how Baton Rouge residents will be encouraged to participate in the pilot activities.
Well, I will tell you that we are now planning a whole messaging campaign around litter abatement, which includes, of course, the issues we're dealing with plastics in a specific area that of our community that's causing a lot of angst. We have one area of our community that for decades, plastics and other trash has been accruing in this one particular area called Burden Place. And so we are working, and that's going to be part of our pilot program, is to clean up that particular area. But for me, there's a broader message that has to come from leadership, and that is that we do not condone a culture of non-recycling, a culture of not being attentive to what we're putting not only in our waterways, but throughout our communities. And so my office is going to be doing a very comprehensive campaign because this is at the top of my list. We are collaborating with our business community, our academic community, and of course, partners like MRCTI, first and foremost on the waterway issue. But those partners, those stakeholders will be part of a voluminous and robust messaging that we will be putting out real soon. Now, if you're from Baton Rouge and you want to get involved in the solution, you could certainly email me at mayor@brla.gov, and I can certainly put you to work within our space.
That is fantastic, and really, really great to hear about all the efforts that are starting to get underway. I'm going to direct the next question to Dr. Jambeck. Could you tell us a bit about how this is being done in a COVID-friendly way and how the project may have had to adapt to the current situations that we're living in?
Sure. You know, I think well, there's a couple of things I want to touch on here. First of all, how COVID has sort of exacerbated the problem of plastic leaking into our environment. I think when we didn't understand the virus as well as we do now, and just initially just needing to protect ourselves, most importantly, human health. And so, you know, a lot of disposable plastic came sort of back in, and then of course, masks and gloves were being worn immediately. And I think just to show you the power of the tracker and what we call participatory sensing, which is people telling us what they're seeing, within days after the public starting to use PPE, we had it being reported in the litter stream. And so just knowing that what we use, some of that ends up leaking out. So that's how we can kind of consciously think about that upstream effort. So safety here, we've got all kinds of guidelines for safety, social distancing, masks. I mean, Barb mentioned a few of these things. You know, gloves and just proper hand hygiene, sort of all the same rules, but just really keeping mindful, not, you know, touching your face, which, you know, the masks help with that. But there's some really great written out rules, even at the end of that video that we showed and within the guide, you know, smaller groups. And we have ways within that guide, we're talking about where to direct people to go. So you don't have to meet in a big group and then go out. There's going to be ways, again, virtually, like this meeting and through the webinars and through the information given in the maps that people can navigate this in pairs, especially.
Great, thank you, Jenna. And now I've heard that we actually are out of time. So I'm going to be passing the mic back to Jenny Wendt from MRCTI. And I want to again thank all of our panelists and thank all of you for your commitment and dedication to address this really critical issue that our planet and our region is facing. Thank you all. Jenny.
We can actually keep going. The senator is, these delays tend to happen with the White House. So
sorry,
no
I
time
got
crunch.
conflicting advice here. Okay, we always have more questions. So let me go to my list. Okay, I think this question I'm going to direct to the mayors. You can just raise your hand. But what from your perspectives do you think will be some of the most challenging aspects for your city in terms of reducing plastic waste? What is most daunting and where, you know, what do you think will be most challenging about moving forward on this issue? Okay, Mayor Carter, thank you.
I'll jump in. You know, the interesting thing about this is it's about challenging ourselves. You know, obviously we can identify trash, we can identify the sources, we can identify the types. Those aren't really the biggest problems. I think the biggest challenge is making sure that we know that that, you know, litter, that waste in our river is human made. And that our river doesn't have to be that way, and really convincing ourselves that there's a better alignment for our river, there's a better situation there, and that our actions can make a difference, that our actions, especially in combination with the actions in other cities along the river, can make a critical difference in that space. So I think the biggest gap for us on this is our imagination and really understanding what our river can be. In a way that I think will drive us to the types of actions that would be necessary to make us do that work. I think the biggest gap, I think the biggest barrier is the limitations of our own imaginations. And I got her to sleep. Everybody see that?
Congratulations. I love that statement that the limit is our imagination. That's spot on. And also just that it's up to really everybody to take action. Did anybody else, Mayor Weston?
Yeah, I couldn't concur more with Mayor Carter on that. You know, we don't get out of situations like this solely by relying on government. We have to have strong partnerships. And the irony behind it is that, you know, the citizens, the majority of the citizens are concerned about the litter, the plastics, you know, what it is doing to our community. And so it takes a very intentional effort upon us to, those of us who are on the same page, to educate and inform the others who are not there yet. Because what we're dealing with is what I often say is that we're dealing with a culture that has existed, I'll just speak for my community, for decades, where people think, you know, trash, it's okay to throw trash out. It's okay to throw plastics out. It's okay to do that. And somewhere along the line, people feel like there's no accountability, if you will, to the rest of the citizens in the community, as well as our environment, right? So I believe that we as leaders have to really press in, and that's why I talked earlier about we're going to do a very robust messaging campaign, but it's getting our citizens to see the possibilities of what can be. And I certainly believe that the direction that we're headed, not only as an organization, but as those of you all who are stakeholders in this plastics reduction process, that we can certainly move the needle with our various constituents.
Thank you for those remarks. That was inspirational. And I'm now going to pass it over to Jenny Wendt to talk about some of the other innovative technology that is being used.
Yes, I just wanted to mention there, you know, I want to preface this by saying this is a pilot project. So a lot of things as we're moving along, we're finding more and more ways to do this and more partnering organizations. One thing that I found, and I think we've experienced as a group, is the passion that so many people and organizations have around this problem. It just, you know, I think originally I thought maybe we'd have a few partners from every city, and now we have over 100, and people still keep contacting us to be involved. Great. So that's one part of it that is expanded. Another part that University of Georgia has acquired are this bottle tag technology. So we've acquired 10 GPS unit of sorts, and those bottles will be placed in the 3 cities, 3 of them in St. Paul, 3 in St. Louis, and 4 in Baton Rouge. And then we can track those bottles and see how they travel down the river. Do they get caught and do they end up on land somewhere, or do they make their way all the way to the Gulf and the ocean? You know, and this of course all depends on the ebb and flow of the river, the flood stages, everything else involved. But it is a really great bit of data that we didn't expect to have when we came in. And I think it'll be really useful for the cities and for us to know how plastics travel through the river system. I don't know, Jenna, if you want to tag on to that at all, since it's your baby.
That was wonderful, and I'm so pleased that MRCTI is so excited about you know, using this technology. We piloted in the Ganges River for the Sea to Source expedition, and then we're able to, I think, I mean, it's just one of the data gaps on sort of the issue more broadly, how much of what's on land actually gets to the river, and then how much, once it gets in the river, actually travels, you know, downstream, and how far. So these will help inform that.
Great, thank you, Jenna and Jenny. For the next question, I'm going
I
to
think we may have Senator Durbin.
Okay.
Okay, then I will wrap it up and say thank you all for being here and listening to us talk about this initiative that we are all so passionate about. And I would like to introduce Mayor Eastern of East St. Louis, Illinois. Mayor Eastern.
Senator Durbin, do we have you? I guess not. Senator Durbin, is that you? Colin, do you want to speak about COVID relief package for a moment?
Yeah. First, let me say thank you for everybody's patience. When you're dealing with the majority whip of the Senate, you have to be a little ambidextrous with Senate leadership schedules. That's just part of the course and a reality. So we thank everybody for being patient. As soon as Senator Durbin comes on, we will of course give him the floor. And if he doesn't make it, that's okay, because Senator Duckworth, another Senate leader, is scheduled for in just under 10 minutes. So any which way, this is going to continue pretty quick. I want to say thank you to our presenters for the plastic pollution initiative. As you can see, it's a big project. This is not a small problem. And as Mayor Gallagher said, and Mayor Broome said at the very beginning of our Capitol meeting, epic problems require epic solutions and epic leadership. And that is what we are trying to achieve. So thank you so much to our partners. Jenny, I just want everybody to know, Jenny has a day job. She actually works for a city full-time in the state of Missouri. Something a lot of our mayors can relate to. And she's doing this. So just mad kudos to her being able to juggle all this, and 100 organizations that have partnered with us to really roll this out. And a big vote of gratitude to United Nations Environment Program and Barbara and her team, which keep us going, as well as National Geographic and the University of Georgia. Full steam ahead on all of that work. So thank you all. While we wait for Senator Durbin and/or Senator Duckworth to come aboard, we do have a critical update to share with our mayors regarding the COVID relief package. It's not related to the bill. This is more of an executive order that has come out of the White House around activating the Defense Logistics Agency around providing additional PPE and resources to our food banks, not just ours, but our food banks across the country. We thought this would be of particular interest to some of our harder hit areas in Northern Illinois and Wisconsin around COVID, as well as the Delta in Mayor Simmons' neck of the woods. Apparently, we can have our food banks sign up for additional resources from the Defense Logistics Agency, DLA, for vaccine deployment. They will be handing it out to them, but you need to know where to go and you need to know how to link up to that. And we are working with DLA right now to make that happen. So if you do have food banks that need additional COVID-related resources, please let us know so that we can communicate that with a DLA. We're also in communication with Feeding America, which is the largest association of food banks nationwide. We have had a conversation with them in regards to partnering our food banks along the Mississippi River with their network and apparatus. I can't tell you how much we have depended on our food banks through the pandemic. They have been a tremendous resource for a lot of our communities where people had nowhere else to go for resources, for food. And then it's an undertaking keeping the volunteers and the staff of our food banks safe and protected just on its own. With all this elevated demand that we're going through, it's an even bigger challenge. So we're happy to link our food banks along the Mississippi River up with that that resource and move that along. Just connect with us best way you can, and we will link that up for you. Brant, are we? Can you let us give us an update on where we are?
Senator Duckworth or Senator Durbin, are you with us? I guess DC traffic is holding up Senator Durbin. Senator Duckworth, are you available yet?
Robin with the senator's office. She is not on the line yet, but I will let you know just as soon as she is.
Okay, thank you, Robin.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. We did, just so everybody's aware, especially our Illinois mayors that are working with us on this session, Mayor Toms, Mayor Simpson, Mayor Everland. Everybody's aware, we did anticipate this may happen. It's tricky getting Senator Durbin's scheduled nailed down because he's got so many demands. So the senators did anticipate the possibility of having to tag team and be on with us at the same time. But hey, they're from the same state and really good friends. So that should not be a problem. They will prologue our conversation with our Missouri mayors and Senator Roy Blunt, which will happen right after the Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth. So any questions or concerns from our mayors regarding the new opportunity with the Defense Logistics Agency on helping our food banks? Happy to share what we know so far, if there are. We too at MRCTI, we have some PPE supply remaining for our mayors. Not much is left. Most of it has been sent out, but we do have some masks, thermometers, goggles, and isolation gowns left. So we can exhaust that supply before we turn to DLA's assistance, certainly. So if there's anything needed immediately, we can send it to you from what we have. Excuse me. And I think at this point, we'll just stand by for when Robin tells us they're ready. Quick check. Do we have Senator East? Excuse me, Senator. Do we have Mayor Eastern on the line?
I'm president accounted for it, Colin.
Ah, there you are. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Also need to do a quick check. Do we have Mayor Stang on? He may not be on yet.
I can see him. I think he's just, he's muted.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Mayor Eberlin, Mayor Eastern, you may have to do a little bit of coordinating. Especially if they all of a sudden sort of come on together. So I just have to keep it a little flexible there.
Not a problem.
No, you guys are used to that.
Yeah, I think we've been down this road a time or two.
Right.
There he is.
A bit easier when you're waiting in a lobby for a meeting, isn't it?
You know, being a mayor, we don't have to worry about flexibility, you know. That doesn't come with the job.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Is Kirsten Nicholson on the line? Sorry, Kirsten Wallace.
I see UMRBA is on as an attendee, Colin.
Okay. Branch, she needs to be unmuted.
Okay, I will unmute her.
Kirsten, are you there?
She's coming in as a panelist.
Okay.
She should be on.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's great.
Let me just introduce you. Everybody, this is Kirsten Wallace. She's the executive director of the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association. This is a group of the 5 states of the Upper River that we work with closely.
Colin,
and,
if I can interject,
yes, sir.
Senator Duckworth is available now.
Oh, okay. Great.
I just got a text from Robin.
Is she there? Senator Duckworth? We can't hear you if you are.
She is in the attendees. She should be coming right in a second.
Never a dull moment. We had to make it suspenseful for everybody.
Me. I was like, I could see all of you, but you couldn't see me.
Hi, Senator. How are you? Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to hand it over to one of your favorite mayors, Mayor Rick Eberlin of Grafton, Illinois.
All right, thank you, Colin. And welcome, Senator. I'm pleased today to introduce Senator Tammy Duckworth, who has represented our state since 2017 in the Senate. Senator Duckworth is a true trailblazer. She's the first Thai American woman elected to Congress, the first person born in Thailand elected to Congress, the first woman with a disability elected to Congress, and the first female double amputee in the Senate. As chair of the Senate Environment and Public Works Subcommittee for Fisheries, Water, and Wildlife, Senator Duckworth will oversee the consequential Water Resources Development Act and many other key authorizations. Before I officially introduce you, Senator, I want to say thank you from the city of Grafton for everything that you've done for our town in your assistance with FEMA, your assistance during this pandemic, and just the discussions that we have that we're working on to help make Grafton a more resilient Mississippi River town. So with that, I'd like to introduce to everyone Senator Tammy Duckworth.
Thank you, Mayor Eberlin. It's so good to see everybody. Thank you for letting me join you today. I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you on your priorities, but I did want to give you a quick update on what we're working on in Congress. This Congress, I will once again be on the Senate Environmental and Public Works Committee, but the key thing is I am now the chairwoman of the Fisheries, Water, and Wildlife Subcommittee. The key part of that is the water, which will do with everything from sewer systems to water reclamation to locks and dams on the Mississippi. So I get to be the chairwoman of that subcommittee. I'm really excited to roll up my sleeves and get to work. I am also going to be the chairwoman on the Armed Services Committee of the Subcommittee on Air and Land, which means I will be dealing with all issues dealing with the Army and the Air Force, to include the Army Corps of Engineers. So I'm really excited to serve as chair of both those committees. I look forward to tackling many of the environmental challenges our nation faces through this role, and many of the water challenges that the folks on this call are facing through both of these gavels that I will now be holding. I hope to expand upon and strengthen many of the priorities included in last year's Water Resources Development Act, for example. In this legislation, we were able to increase federal cost share for inland waterways, which was, I think was a critical improvement for infrastructure, especially along the Mississippi River. This legislation also authorized more funding for pump station recapitalization. And after years of recent flooding, you all know how important and necessary these improvements are. So going forward, I hope to build on these improvements and secure more protections for clean water, safe drinking water, and more water infrastructure improvements. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. And thank you for having me. I'm going to shut up so we can have more information put out, and I will take a lot of notes. Thank you.
Senator, thank you on behalf of Grafton, the state of Illinois, and MRCTI. Go ahead.
Can we have Mayor Eastern introduce Senator Durbin, so maybe the senators can tag team on answering some questions momentarily?
Sure thing.
You have both of them on.
I will defer to Senator Eastern of East St. Louis. Thank you.
I knew that Dick, I got a note that Dick might join us, so this is great. We've got leadership on the call, guys.
All right.
Our whip.
Outstanding. Well, thank you. Now with the feature discussion with the Senate leadership in our 2021 policy platform and climate work through corridor, I will be joined by 3 senators for the very valuable discussion: Senator Durbin, Senator Duckworth of Illinois, and Senator of Minnesota, each of these will be with us for about 30 minutes to go over our policies and platforms for the update work of the Senate. Joining me for the discussion on the mayor's side is my Rick Eberlin of Grafton, Melvin Carter of St. Paul, and Jacob Frey of Minneapolis, Minnesota. First off, I'm very honored to introduce my senator and my fellow Assumption pioneer, high school pioneer, Senator Richard Durbin, Majority Whip of the Senate. Originally from my CW to CW St. Louis, Mr. Durbin was first elected to the Senate in 1996, and now he's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee and a former member of the Mississippi Rivers Caucus. Senator, it's my honor to have you. Thank you.
Mayor, did you ever think that you would have a friend of yours born in East St. Louis say, I'm sorry I was late, I was meeting with the president in the White House?
I did not. I did not.
Did you get a White House chocolate chip cookie, Dick? They're
I
delicious.
brought a chocolate chip cookie back from my assistant here. So listen, Tammy is giving you the good news about her committee assignment. She's right where we need her. She's on the authorizing side of the House, which is half of the battle. I'm on the appropriation side of the House, which is the other half of the battle. So I think between us, we can do some good, not only for Illinois, but for all the cities up and down the Mississippi. The first thing we need to do is to pass this American Rescue Plan from President Biden. There is billions, literally billions of dollars coming back to your local governments as a result of it. It is really a helping hand for you because of expenses you've run into because of COVID and revenue that you've lost. And the money is mandated that it all isn't going to sit in at the state level. It all isn't going to go to big cities. It's going to go to everybody across the board. And that's the way it ought to be. And I know that President Biden's next plan after we pass this American Rescue Plan is his infrastructure bill he calls Build Back Better. It's overdue. We haven't had an infrastructure bill in the last 4 years. And it's time for us to get one. We need one for our waterways. We need one for our highways and airports and the rest. Most importantly, we need to put America back to work in good paying jobs that are important for our communities. So Tammy and I will be supporting the American Rescue Plan that's going to come up, we think, in about a week. And Tammy's going to be on the drawing board of the next plan on Build Back Better. So we're in good position to help you and want to do it any way we can.
Thank you, Senator. Now we invite the mayors to the meeting and attendees to participate in a broader conversation. Please let us use the Zoom to raise our hand to recognize each chat.
Mayor Eastern, if I could please ask the senator a question.
Yes.
Senator, I was hoping to ask a question. By the way, this is Rick Everland, Mayor of Grafton, Illinois. I was in your office a couple of years ago, and we got acquainted. You've got familiarity with Grafton as you were here during the flood of 1993, so you know what this town goes through. So I just kind of want to get your thoughts. As you know, our region of the Mississippi has been through some significant disasters over the past several years, culminating with the longest flood ever recorded in our history, and that was the flood of 2019. The pandemic, of course, have made all those impacts that much worse. Our policy platform urges support for several programs that can help us recover our economies from the pandemic that we hope that you can bring back in your role on the Senate Appropriations Committee. Things like the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund, the Marine Highway Grant Program, which will help bring container on barge to America's Central Port, and a scenic byways program, which will help the tourism industry, which is so important here in Grafton. And it's going to help all the Mississippi River towns recover, especially ours, that the majority of our economy is driven by tourism. So, Senator, if I could get your thoughts on those things, I would appreciate it.
I can just tell you that you referred, was it 1993, the flood that we went through down there?
Yes, sir.
Well, if I remember right, I was in I don't know if you were there, but I was in a rowboat with Vice President Al Gore. He came down to take a look at the damage that was done. So we've been through this before. The most recent flood, the 2019 flood, I didn't make it up to Grafton. I got to Alton, and I met with the mayor there, and he showed me the line on the, I guess it's the elevator, the grain elevator that showed the previous high mark for the other flood in 1993. You were below it, but it wouldn't go away. It just stayed forever and ever. And it really did a lot of damage because it didn't drain down quickly. You know what we got to do? I know that you're all pushing safeguarding the Mississippi River Act, because our story in Illinois is repeated up and down the Mississippi River, particularly north of St. Louis. And we've got to deal with that. And it goes back to my point I made earlier. Tammy Duckworth is in a position to really help us on the authorizing side to include. And I want to help her when it comes to funding on the appropriations side. We have just paid a heavy price with all this flooding in the past, and whatever we can do, building up permanent levees, making sure that we have the locks and dams modernized, I'm all for it.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Mayor Eastern, back to you.
Thank you. While mayors and I consider questions, I would like to draw your attention, Senator, to a proposed Safeguarding the Mississippi River Together Act. We would really like to secure the support for our plan to better manage the Mississippi River in close cooperation with the Interior, the EPA, the Corps, and the states. Our proposal includes an economic development grant that will really help my city, especially when it will help me shift the economy from my city to pollutant industrial base to a clean manufacturing, commodity movement, and tourism. We hope that we can work with you and your office in that direction.
Of course you can work with us. I'm happy to work with you. And I have several other legislative priorities that will help with this process as well.
Got me in.
Thank you. Mayor Toms.
Yes, Senator, I would like to ask a question. This is Mike Tomes, Mayor of Rock Island. And I was just hoping to get your thoughts on the prospect of an infrastructure package coming together this year. The Secretary of Transportation presented at our last meeting stating he hoped a package could happen, but paying for it could be a challenge. And I know you talked about this a little bit ago, but could you expand on that?
Well, I'm on the transportation committee, and it is a priority. I know, Senator Durbin, he just came from the White House, so he can talk to he's had more recent conversation with President Biden than I have. But an infrastructure package is critical, not just for fixing our nation's infrastructure, making us competitive on the global stage, but it's what we're going to use to help pull our economy out of the crisis we're in as a result of COVID-19. And I think that is the next priority after we get this COVID relief bill out. Don't you think so, Dick?
I think so. There are two things that I think, three things that are in favor of it. President Biden has said he wants to put it in the next, what they call reconciliation bill, which means it's it's going to be easier to pass. It won't take 60 votes, it takes a majority. Secondly, we're being very honest with people. We think if there's an add to the federal gas tax to pay for it, it makes sense. The reason it didn't happen in the last 4 years is the last president said he didn't want to raise a gas tax. And so we didn't have any money to build with. And so this president is facing it honestly, as I think he should. And the third thing is, and this is very important, and Tammy will appreciate this more than anybody, we are seriously talking about restoring earmarks. Earmarks. Some of you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Where members of Congress can help to guide the money back to projects in their own districts and states. And let me tell you what, that is the political force you need. People want to do things for their district, their home, their state, and they don't want the governor to take all the credit. I'm not picking on our governor. They all do it. They don't want the governor to take all the credit, or somebody in the Federal Highway Administration who's never set foot in your state sending in the checks. So when we get to earmarks, I think it's going to change the whole conversation for the better.
I agree. I think it will. And then we can really prioritize some of these key initiatives that we've been trying for so many years to get grant funding for, and just have fallen just short.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Mayor Easton.
Yes. Again, I want to thank you, Senator Durbin, for being here. We look forward to working with you to move our corridor forward. Mayor Eberlein, I will now hand the meeting back over to you. And also thank you, Senator Tammy Duckworth. Thank you.
Thank you all. It's good to be with you.
Thank you,
Mayor Easton.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator Duckworth, if you're going to stay around for a little bit longer, I've got some additional stuff if you got time for us.
Sure, my staff will yank me. That's a good thing about being in a wheelchair. They just come and roll me out. But go ahead. I'll stay on as long as they let me.
All right, appreciate it. So we could bring the rest of this meeting and the meeting participants in discussion now with questions for the senator. And Senator Duckworth, I want to thank you for your support in the Resiliency Revolving Loan Fund that got passed and signed into law in the first of the year. Having your endorsement helped us get that tool enacted. We now have another more far-reaching proposal that we think will help all of Western Illinois and the Illinois River Basin especially. Our Safeguarding the Mississippi River Together Act, we think, can help Illinois with its nutrient pollution issues, assist our economies in recovering from the pandemic, and place us on a path of truly making the Mississippi River corridor more resilient and sustainable. We hope that we can work with you, just like we worked on the previous Storm Act, to move this proposal forward. So just like for any comments that you may have in regards to this.
I think it's great. I think it's a great idea, and I'm happy to work with you on it. I know that it has funding for both grants and studies, as well as the provisions of the Federal Leadership Committee and the National Mississippi River Program Office. I've often said that the Upper Mississippi needs to come together in this way, the way the Lower Mississippi has, and I think this is a great step forward along that path.
Thank you. Mayor Simpson, I believe you may have a question for the senator.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor Eberlein. I have a question for Senator Duckworth. Thank you again for being here, Senator Duckworth, and for your remarks. This is Mayor Simpson. Constance Carroll, as you're aware, our region has had to deal with divestment disasters and a lot of repetitive loss throughout the Dogtooth area from East Cape Girardeau to my city. I'm hopeful that MRCTI can be a close partner in our work on the Climate Crisis Committee. We really don't want to see the administration's climate work leave Middle America behind, but we feel that it's a real possibility. Can we work with you to ensure our corridor has a seat at the table and access to the White House, Office of Domestic Climate Policy, and Secretary Kerry's team? They may listen to everything we have to say, but we know they're listening to you. So we'd like for you, of course, be there for us and a voice for us.
Of course I will work with you. And you should know, some of you may have met Radha from my staff, who was my environmental policy person. Well, she is now at the White House Council on the Environment. So I have an in. And I'm also, just for you all to know, I also am reintroducing my Environmental Justice for All Act, which talks about the injustices that so many communities, poorer communities, rural communities, and communities of color have seen as we have developed our nation on the backs of these communities. And we put our most polluting industries, we put, they bear the brunt of our nation's industrialization and being an industrial corridor, but we've not put the investments into the communities. And so my bill would also address that as well. But yes, I will absolutely work with you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Any other questions for the senator? So if there's no further questions, I want to convey once again our gratitude to you, Senator Duckworth, and to your staff, Chelsea there in your DC office, and Robin Cromer, an aide, I think out of your Belleville, Illinois office. She's been tremendous help here in Grafton, a very open and available pipeline to you. And for that, I'm very grateful. So I'm going to thank you again, and thanks for helping improve our region. And I will turn things over now to Mayor Melvin Carter of St. Paul for our next conversation. Mayor Carter.
Actually, Mayor, Senator, sorry, before you go, I'm not sure Senator Klobuchar is with us yet. Brandt, has Senator Klobuchar signed on?
No, she is not.
Yeah.
I'll cover for her until she gets here, unless my staff makes me go.
Well, no, we actually had a couple of questions come in via text for you. And one was if you knew of any kind of a timeline for how Senate EPW is going to start the consideration process for the next WERDA.
I think it's right at the top of the priority list. I couldn't tell you exactly what the timeline is. Where we are all focused right now is getting the COVID bill out. And as Dick has said, is hopefully by next week. By the way, there's $159 billion in that specifically for local governments. That's counties and municipalities. We've broken out that money There's 150 billion for states, and then there's 150 plus billion for municipalities and counties. So you should be able to see some of that money. And I think, you know, Mayor Eberlin, you and I talked about this, how this money is going to the state and not coming out to you. And it's really frustrating because the state's saying, well, it's got to be, you know, it's got to be COVID relief, but you've lost a lot of tax revenue. So we address that issue. So that's our priority, to get that out. And then, of course, the infrastructure bill is the next thing. I will let you know as soon as I know what the priority is for WERDA, but it's on the front burner. I just don't think it's number one or number two, because we're trying to get the COVID bill out and the infrastructure bill out first.
That actually feeds really well into the next question, and that was, do you have any design or had any preliminary conversations regarding how EPW would be involved in assembling a major infrastructure package?
I do. I am, you know, and because I am the chair of one of the subcommittees, specifically the water subcommittee, I will be driving the train when it comes to water infrastructure. And as I said again, the water infrastructure is not just waterways, but it's also, for some of you, sewer systems and water reclamation and getting lead out of your pipe. You know, my whole position is, if we're going to have a major infrastructure package, let's dig once and let's fix the sewers at the same time, and not fix a road and then come back and dig it up again to fix the sewers. So yes, I will have a say in it. My focus will be water, but I'm also on the transportation subcommittee. So I'll be doing the infrastructure part as well from that seat.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator. And this is a question for me, actually. What you just said made me think of this. Do you, being on the Climate Crisis Committee for the Senate, has the White House talked to the committee or engaged with you on the April 22nd summit? What the White House hopes to achieve with that summit and who's going to be engaged?
I have not engaged with them on it, but again, you know, that is our focus is just on this week to get these two bills out. Let me follow up with you and see and tell you what we've got on the summit. I know the White House has reached out, but part of it is really talking about how we can do climate change in a way that spurs the economy. And I personally have had these conversations with President Biden. When I was being vetted for vice president, I had extensive conversations with him about climate change. And what I said to him was, Mr. Vice President, you know, at the time, when you become president, please set a carbon neutral future date and then let the market get us there. Please have an all of the above approach to how we get to carbon neutral. And let's make investments in coal country. I have my Marshall Plan for coal country. Let's make investments in everything so that we can get to that. But let's not play favorites among this type of energy versus that type of energy. We need to push ethanol and grant more permits to develop more forms of biodiesel, for example. And he was very supportive of that. He said, Tammy, that's exactly where I am. So know that that will probably be the attitude that he'll take when it comes to the summit. But I'm happy to get more information to you once I know more.
No, and thank you. And we would just mention the mayors are going to be signing tomorrow, as a matter of fact, an agreement with Ducks Unlimited to deploy natural infrastructure along the corridor. And actually, Mayor Eberlin was already working with them, as was Mayor Eastern, on deploying natural infrastructure, one around Horseshoe Lake, just above East St. Louis, so that water would go to Horseshoe Lake instead of East St. Louis. And then Mayor Eberlin was working on a project with them right where the Illinois and the Mississippi River meet to reactivate some floodplain that was cut off from the river so that vacant land would flood instead of Mayor Eberlin. So we'd love to just keep you apprised on how that effort goes and where the projects end up. We expect at least a couple of them to be in Illinois.
Great, that'll create some great wetlands for some waterfowl. Good hunting coming up, huh?
Yes, that'll do great. That's the exact location is the Gilbert Lake, Swan Lake refuge area. So that will help us out quite a bit.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, folks, I think I have to go. I've got a vote coming up. Thank you. And I will try to track down Senator Klobuchar for you. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Senator Klobuchar is finishing up a call. She will be with us in a second.
Okay. Do we have Mayor Carter and Mayor Fry on?
Yes, we're both here.
Oh, there he is. Hey, Mayor. How are you?
Good to see you all. Thanks so much for having us and putting this on. Thanks, Colin.
Oh, you bet. Sporting the goatee. I like it. I didn't want to be the only one anymore. Do we have Mayor Fry on? I'm sorry, you're Mayor Fry. Do we have Mayor Carter on?
Yep, I'm here as well, Colin.
Okay. Thank you so much, mayors. I think Senator Klobuchar is going to be on in a second. She's just coming off a call.
Okay.
Yep. There we are.
Okay.
All
Hey there.
yours, Mayor Carter. Hi, Senator.
How are you?
Thank you so much for joining us, Senator. I will hand it off to your illustrious mayors, Mayor Carter and Mayor Fry. Mayor Carter.
All right. 2 for the price of 1. I've got 2 mayors on there. That's great. All right. Oh, you're muted, Melvin. I know you're never quiet, but you are right now.
I'm never quiet, and I appreciate that. I accept that as a big compliment.
It is.
I know. I appreciate it greatly. Senator, it is great to see you, and we just want to say thank you very much for your leadership for our country. Thank you so much for your leadership along our river. I know Mayor Fry is here with me, and I'm holding Amila, who you know well as well, who's trying to spill stuff, but it's her first birthday, so she gets to do whatever it is that she wants. We're excited to close this piece of our meeting, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We'll proceed into our conversation. I'm actually going to kick it over to Mayor Fry, but excited to proceed with our conversation with you and to be able to do this. Mayor Fry?
All right. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor Carter. Big happy birthday to Amila on behalf of both myself and Sarah and Frida, one of her very few friends at this early stage. And thank you for Mayor Carter, the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to share Mayor Carter's sentiment and just welcome our very own, our Senate's great leaders and some of the transformative work that's happening at our state. Senator Klobuchar, thank you so much for joining us. In Minnesota, we fondly call Senator Klobuchar the senator from next door. And that's not just the book title for me. She literally lives just a few blocks away. She's been a wonderful friend and mentor and of course neighbor. And the Mississippi River, it runs pretty much right down the center of our neighborhood. It is an important location for our entire city and our state, and we recognize that it's vital activities to the entire country. So I'm just grateful for your leadership and partnership and friendship, Senator. And we can't tell you how much we appreciate it.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks to both of you. And it's great to see all of you. I've spent the morning on an important hearing with Senator Peters of Michigan and Blunt and Portman about what happened at the Capitol. It was a difficult hearing, but we actually got a bunch of new information and we tried to be as constructive as possible. I say to a Zoom room of mayors who have to be constructive whether they want to or not every single day. And our hope is to make sure this doesn't happen again by figuring out what went wrong and what went right. And not much went right except the end when we finished our jobs and ended up on that inaugural stage with the spray paint still at the bottom of the columns, but the sky was blue and I was so proud of what we had done that day and proud of Joe Biden, as well as all the Republican leaders that were there as well. And it's a new beginning for us to dust off our democracy and get to work. And that includes working with you guys. And so I love this group. And I know your co-chairs as well Baton Rouge Mayor Sharon Weston Broome. I saw her on there, as well as Bettendorf Mayor Bob Gallagher. Okay, so maybe I spent a little time in Iowa. I don't know why last year and the year before, but I do remember Bettendorf's Crawford Brew Works and spending some time there. So I love the river group. I love the river. As Jacob noted, I live on the river. And of course, for Minneapolis and St. Paul, the river doesn't divide us, it unites us. So whenever I go on a walk, I almost always cross the Mississippi River. And we have a beautiful bridge right there, which an example of government investing in an old bridge that's now become a really a tourist location for so many people in the metropolitan area. During the pandemic, they announced that they were draining the Mississippi in where the lock and dam was, which is a whole nother story, right where I live. And there were literally tens, it felt like something out of the 1950s, but it shows you, one, during the pandemic, people don't have a lot to do that's safe. But two, it also shows you that the rivers are such a magnet. People find them interesting and mysterious and cool. Maybe Jacob knows the numbers, but tens of thousands of people came over 4 days just to see what it looked like when the water was drained out of the river. So, okay. And they found all kinds of stuff, you know, on the riverbed. And it just made me think again of the attraction. I'm one of the co-vice chairs, now that sounds like a Washington term, of the Senate Great Lakes Task Force. As we know, the lakes aren't just great, they're superior. But we work on protecting our treasured water resources. And I just see this as a major part of our water infrastructure. And I figure one of the jobs of those of us that work on these issues, Senator Stabenow and Peters, and I'm going to forget people, but Blunt and Portman, who I already mentioned, and many others, that our job is to make sure when these guys start talking about ocean funding and ports, which we love, that we make sure that both for many of us, the Great Lakes, but also the river, and particularly, of course, the Mississippi River doesn't get neglected. As we know, the Mississippi moves billions of dollars worth of goods from steel and lumber to fertilizer and grain, and also has the potential, which it is in many places, to be a great spot for tourism. And I would like to see even more, of course, of riverboats and the like going down that river. We all know that just like everywhere else, the pandemic has affected so many of your towns, and including what goes on at the river, but the river never stopped flowing. And I believe that we are in a really good place right now with the vaccines. We couldn't have better news this week than the announcement that the Biden administration believes that by May, every adult, there'll be a vaccine available to them. And at first, when I saw it on Twitter, I'm like, maybe someone made this up, but that was certainly good news. And I'm sure it's been, and having been actually on 2 calls with Dr. Fauci the last few weeks, I think, you know, the numbers are down, but the work you're doing to make sure that we get through these last few months safely by keeping sensible rules in place is going to make a huge difference. So what are we doing right now? We have this relief package that we're going to start voting on this week that came over from the House. And that follows on what we did in December, $8.75 billion in December for vaccine distribution and promotion. The upcoming relief package includes an additional $14 billion for vaccine related, and $1 billion for the CDC to strengthen confidence in the vaccine. And so that's really where we begin, because the only way we're going to recover economically is if we do that. For me, the economic piece of this that's going to be in that package, the help for, you know, I'd mention it, local and state governments is equally important. And as you know, that's in there, which really wasn't in there like it should have been in the last relief package. The other things I wanted to mention is my support for WERDA. I've worked with many of you on that in the past. And our recent passage of the 2020 WERDA bill is going to involve more critical investments in the Great Lakes and the Mississippi, We've had some provisions in there designed to stop spread of invasive aquatic species, something that we've worked on in Minnesota very hard. In fact, we closed the lock and dam I mentioned. We actually had to close that so that we wouldn't ruin all of our lakes and our fishing beyond the river. So the 2020 law we just passed for WERDA also includes provisions that I push for on harbor maintenance and inland waterways trust funds. As you know, they're still better than I do. There's still more work to be done on modernizing our locks and dams. And since infrastructure and build back better is Joe Biden's really his top policy priority, I will note in my presidential campaign, that was the first thing I led with. And okay, one more thing. And the last thing I'll mention is when I announced on that snowy day where on the Mississippi River, I literally mentioned most of your states as you take the journey through America on the Mississippi. And a lot of the points I made were about infrastructure. And I think one of the things that's hard, you know, as mayors is you can always have great ribbon cuttings for roads and bridges, but some of these water projects, whether they're sewer and water or whether they're actual water projects due to erosion or due to infrastructure are never as sexy. And yet I think we all know how important they are. Also, I've introduced legislation with Senator Rubio this year that would give state governments the resources to mount effective conservation programs and reduce water pollution locally. It's called the Local Water Protection Act, and it would reauthorize an EPA grant program that provides states and local communities funding to develop and implement programs for managing non-point source water pollution. So keep an eye out on that. Those bipartisan bills seem to do much better than ones that are not. And our legislation would reauthorize $200 million annually for the voluntary grant fund to give you guys greater flexibility to decrease water pollutants. And I think as we know in Texas, we continue to have issues with climate change. And as they saw from their massive electric grid failure, their shortage of potable water, millions without heat, under notice to boil tap water before drinking it. We also must look at using more revolving loan funds for those kinds of disasters, and actually pass something back in December on that. Last thing I guess I led with tourism. I head up the tourism caucus with Senator Blunt, as well as Senator Schatz and Cortez Masto. And I just think the Mississippi River, and I've said this many times as I've tried to talk to cruise ship people, I think it's underutilized in terms of what we could be doing when it comes to tourism. We're helping the tourism industry through this pandemic. That's very key, and including everything from actual tourism bills to the bill that I just did with Senator Cornyn that helps our venues, which are the heart of so many small towns, middle towns, and big towns across America. Last thing I just wanted to end with is the importance of the infrastructure bill as a whole. Maybe we can do that with Q&A, but that's going to be our next thing. And there'll be a lot of things in this bill, including broadband, one of my top priorities. But when we do the infrastructure bill, we've got to make sure that we are taking care of our river cities. And that will be high on my priority list. And I look forward to working with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. That unsurprisingly is a long list of things that you are doing to to support our work along the river. It's unsurprising because we've seen you in Minnesota and in Iowa and all across our country being a champion for all of the things that all of our communities need. We just want to thank you for your support of the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund and joining your Mississippi River Caucus co-chair, Senator Blunt, to introduce the STEP Act for our tourism and outdoor recreation industry rebound from the pandemic. We just really appreciate that.
You guys are just mad that Senator Blunt and I, when we did the inauguration, didn't bring up this, esteemed position we have on the Mississippi River Tom. It would have been good.
Well, it would have been. Well, we still have opportunity. We'll keep it going. So I think we can now move into a brief Q&A and invite participants to chime in by raising their hand or by using the chat. Mayor Fry, I'll throw it to you across the river for our first question.
Nice throw across the river, Mayor Carter. Thank you so much. So, Senator, we're taking a bit of a poll here of all the members of Congress to join us for this year's Capitol meeting on what the chances are of getting a larger, more comprehensive infrastructure bill coming together. So from your perspective on the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, do you think that package would be possible? Of course, noting that the urgency for this kind of bill, it certainly seems to be increasing, but we need a way to pay for all of these items. And that always, at the end of the day, ends up being the sticking point. So what are your thoughts on that? And what can we do to help you get this very critical bill passed?
I think we are in a good place only because, for one, Joe Biden has been very clear about his priorities, that this is the next big thing he wants to do. And there's two ways we can do it. We can work on a bipartisan basis. As you know, there's always historically been a lot of Republican support for infrastructure. The FAST Act that did bring a lot of money into our states, that was Mitch McConnell and Barbara Boxer. I remember I was the first Democrat after Barbara to sign on to it, but we were able to get a bunch of funding out of that. This is much bigger and bolder what we want to do now. And so my hope in, seeing the positive response we have for like Mayor Buttigieg as the transportation secretary from Republicans, Polly Trottenberg was before us today, his deputy. And there again just seems to be this infrastructure has always brought people together. That being said, it's going to come down to how much of a package. And if it's just way too small to really help and make the dent we need for our, as we mentioned, rivers, but our airports and rail and our roads and bridges, we can use reconciliation again. And I think that's one of the things that we have talked about with regard to infrastructure, that it would be worth it to do this because our country has been waiting so long for this investment. And also in so many of the areas, the pandemic has really shown a light on what we always knew was a problem, including broadband, whereas many rural areas and small towns just don't have access. And Clyburn and I actually lead that bill. He leads it in the House, I lead it in the Senate to put 100 billion in broadband. And we wouldn't do an infrastructure bill without it, not just because it's a really good policy idea, but because it's Jim Clyburn. So we'll be getting that done. So that's why I do think there's a lot of impetus to moving on these things. And as I said, we want to make sure the water infrastructure is strongly included.
Well, thank you so much, Senator. That makes a whole lot of sense. And even if a major infrastructure bill does not become a reality, we recognize that there are regular order vehicles the mayors have identified as priorities going forward. And we know we can work with your office to move legislation like the highway bill, the national flood insurance reauthorization. There have been so many bills that you've managed to push through, and we can't tell you how much we appreciate it, as well as the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which we also support as well. And so I'll really appreciate it, and I'll kick it back over, throw it back across the river to Mayor Carter.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not the fastest on this. Is there any other Q&A? If there's any questions, folks can raise their hands or ask in the chat.
We do have a comment in the chat that says, thank you for your support of the Mississippi River, Senator. So I think that's something everybody echoes.
Someone who is listening, so that's great.
We all see and recognize and appreciate that leadership.
Okay, you see what's behind me? This is actually, look at that. So that's one of those WPA murals that I have on my wall in here that artists did during the Depression. And it's called The Gathering of the Raspberries. And whenever the Southern senators come in for those Southern area mayors, they always think it's their area. But in fact, it was a painting for Minnesota. Amusing, it's a inner ring suburb called Hopkins, has the Raspberry Festival, even though they don't grow any raspberries. So they had it in their post office since the Depression. They gave it to one of our art galleries, the Wiseman, and I found it in the basement. And we can legally borrow art in the US Senate. And so that's where it is. And the Smithsonian had, during the downturn, downturn back in 2009, they had a whole exhibit of these WPA murals that was really cool. And I noticed Minnesota was way overrepresented, so we must have had a bunch of artists. And the next day I told our staff, I want to talk to the head of the Smithsonian. My mural is bigger than anyone's that was there. And then I decided, I don't need to mention it. They probably want to borrow it, so it's still there.
Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate the history lesson and agree with everything you said, except for the possibility that Minnesota could possibly be overrepresented anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Including with you too. So.
And with you and Mayor Fry on the mic with me, I'm sure we can carry a majority here in that conversation. If there are no further questions, I think we can close this portion of our meeting. And thank you, Senator, for joining us this afternoon.
Very good.
Thank you so
much.
much.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
We'll now proceed to our discussion with FEMA on implementing the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund Act.
Mayors, thank you so much, Mayor Fry, Mayor Carter, for handling that for us and all your leadership and coordination. I think we're actually going to be waiting on the senator from Missouri. Senator Roy Blunt is going to be joining us in just a few minutes, and we'll hand it over to Mayor Phil Stang to manage that. However, before he hops on, we do have an important update to share from the states of the Upper Mississippi River Basin, including Minnesota. In fact, Kirsten, do you live in Minnesota, Kirsten, or do you live in Wisconsin? I can't remember.
Yeah, I live in Minnesota.
Minnesota, so, okay.
Great
Very
state.
Good. Yeah. This is my colleague, Kirsten Wallace. She is the executive director of the Upper Mississippi River Basin Association, and we work with them. They are 5 states of the river, and she's going to take a few minutes to tell us about what the governors of the Upper Miss have been doing to put together a proposal that they are calling the Keys to the Mississippi River. Kirsten, please.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. And more than just to talk to you about that work, really invite you to continue participating with us in that work, because the mayors are so vital to any kind of work that the states are doing on the river. So thanks for this time, and to plug me in, I wanted to just mention a little bit about UMRVA for just a moment. So while Colin said we represent the governors, they work with their different agencies that have responsibility for the river. So when we look at a river issue, we look at it from a transportation, ecology, water quality, Department of Ag, so agriculture standpoint, economic development, all in one. So we are really committed to integrated multi-purpose management of the river like you all are. So we share in that. We are working on this report called Keys to the River, but it's a point in time in long-term resilience planning related to floods, drought, and sediment. So things that are, the forefront of your minds and your work. And what that report does, we did a targeted review. So we're getting comments on those, and Colin has received that report. And so we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But what it does is lays out some real long-term planning needs and some really tough questions, but also some near-term important actions that we can do to try to secure funding for. And a lot of those things we align with you all on. So one was, for example, HECRES. Now, HECRES is a 2D model that is now along the entire Mississippi River, Upper Miss, also on the Illinois River. So your cities can benefit from having that HECRES. We have secured some funding to start a flow frequency update. So, our flood profiles are old, but we have some funding to start that work. We want to do a better job of, at a 5-state level, looking at the economic and social vulnerabilities from floods, droughts, and sediment. Also, the states are looking collaboratively at requests that we're receiving from other parts of the country that are more water starved to take major diversions out of the basin. That's one thing that we're working on, but also how does drought really unfold? And it unfolds really in different ways And that depends on the different kinds of economic sectors that or ecological sectors that it's impacting. Dredge material management, you all are familiar, and particularly what we're hearing from local communities is that, you know, a lot of river communities are very dependent on the river for recreation, their economies are, and just getting access to backwater habitat or to getting out on the river with all of the sediment is challenging, but also challenging for the ports and terminals. But it's also important for the reliability of the navigation channel and using that for commerce. You know, we also recognize that obviously the river is a product of what's going on in the watershed. And so there's some watershed and climate actions that we want to put our minds around or weight around. And one of those is updated climate projection tools. And so the work I think that MRCTI is also supporting for looking at Atlas 14 or other models or methods to understand better what our future might hold in terms of precipitation is really important, as well as just general information exchange about what we know about how the climate is affecting us, how the floods to drought changes are affecting our resilience. But then also we know that work in the watershed is required, and it's very hard. It's hard to get our arms wrapped around, especially non-point. And, each of the states has nutrient reduction strategies that you are involved in. And we are making a pitch for a partnership between US EPA and NRCS with the states to take the work that's been done through nutrient reduction strategies, but really scale it up. And there's, agriculture groups support that, as well as NACWA, which represents wastewater, but also drinking water municipalities. What we're hearing from municipalities is that they're really concerned about high water, low water, but then the event for HABs. So trying to get our arms wrapped around that. The Keys to the River report also includes these really tough actions that I know you want to be a part of the discussion. And so I'm just going to briefly mention a couple of them, but what we want to look at is, we understand that current management is no longer accepted. We've heard that loud and clear. So what is a new management structure around flood conveyance? How should floods be conveyed? Where and how should land uses be protected? Whether that means various cells taking on water, or it's the project like you just talked about with DU. That's awesome. How does that fit within a systemic plan? And what's different? What land uses are protected, but where and how should they change? And what does resilience look like? How are the tributaries, which tributaries are affecting the river's resilience the most? And what work can we do in those? And then what are the systemic impacts of low flow with water availability? And so trying to learn more about that. And one thing, I've just a separate announcement, Scott Morlock is on here, but USGS just secured funding for the Illinois River Basin, the entire basin, to do next generation water observing. And so the point was to take that, learn about the Illinois River, but then also transfer that information to the upper Miss. So really exciting work there. So Colin, that's just kind of an overview of what we're doing, but we'd really appreciate a partnership with MRCTI on this, and any other questions I would be happy to field.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kirsten. I appreciate that report. What do you see as the next steps for the Keys to the River effort now that you have the report? What are you looking to do this year?
Yep. So the board right now is putting together a more detailed scope of work where we outline those next steps. And some of the consideration is, do we look at specific bottleneck points and think about solutions in that area? But I think this next year we will scope further what kinds of planning needs, long-term resilience planning needs need to happen in the river, and how we can take that next big step. Because as you know, these issues are really challenging to get all of us around the same page. So it's taking these questions, but really focusing them now with more a resilience plan.
Very good. And you did a lot of listening sessions to put that report together up and down the river in several of our cities. Will you be doing more of those listening sessions again for any other phase of the scope, or like a check-in or an update, or is now the point where you're going to start really putting together the plan?
No, we will have to do that. We received tremendous amount of, so at these listening sessions that Colin spoke to, we held 6 of them. And we did a much different approach than typical public meetings happen. We allowed folks at the forum, or just set up an arrangement for a forum where community leaders could pick a topic and arrange a conversation around that topic. So like people say, breaks are the best, that's the value of the meeting. We just had a bunch of breaks, or people could talk about things, but we overheard a lot of really important conversation and learned a lot about your stakeholders' interest in the river and what they're facing with flood fighting. I mean, we held them right in the summer and fall of 2019. And so, we heard real raw stories of emotions and whatnot that your communities go through having flood after flood, but especially after a flood like 2019. So how do we use those sessions? I think, continuing along the process of open engagement and back and forth conversations and conversations around community will be those values that we want to have when we have these kinds of public meetings. Obviously we're in COVID, so anything over, having those kinds of discussions over Zoom are incredibly hard. But finding a way to do that during and post COVID, we understand that the social element of this kind of work is probably even more important than bringing a model to the table. And so that will be, a foundational piece, is the social element, the communities. And actually we're following a method called systematic development of informed consent. And so at every stage of developing this work, we will be looking for informed consent among those who are directly affected, and that includes your cities.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Really appreciate you being with us today. I think we have Senator Roy Blunt on the line standing by now. So thank you again, Kirsten, and we look forward to working with you on that effort.
Thank you for your time.
You bet. Brant, do we have the senator?
Senator, are you there? Amanda from Senator Blunt's office? I see his name.
Hey there, I won't turn the camera on because you guys don't want to see me. You want to see the senator. This is Amanda. He is finishing up his other commitment before this right now, and I will have him on any minute now.
Thank you, Amanda.
Colin, if I could also just make one pitch.
Sure.
Yep. It's a challenge already to kind of get the public really engaged and to kind of get this two-way dialogue. And I think municipalities, you all as mayors, are going to be really important, especially to helping us do better at engaging with disadvantaged communities and members there. And so one thing that Colin and I have talked about is maybe some potential ways to partner to do that work better. So I just wanted to, while we had some time, just to say that I would appreciate any input along those lines as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Missouri is now chair of your association, right, Kirsten? It's Drew Button.
Yes, that's correct. Drew Bunton is the Deputy Director of Missouri DNR, and he is our chair this year.
Great. And he'll be chair until this time next year?
Correct.
Okay.
But he is also, with the way our board works, it's a consensus based, and all board members are equally engaged at all times. So all 5 states are equally engaged.
Very good. If anybody has questions for Kirsten, please feel free to ask. We should have the senator on any moment. Thanks for working with us on this, Kirsten.
Of course.
I'm just going to do a quick check in. Do we have, I think we do have Senator, God bless, Mayor Phil Stang on.
I'm here.
There you are.
Yep.
Mayor Bob Fox.
I'm here.
And Mayor Stu Grantham.
I'm here.
All right. All Missouri zone.
That's us. Sometimes next to the river, sometimes under the river.
Let's not hope under the river for a long time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had to get that joke out of my system, then I can.
Well, it's kind of down right now, right? Is
Gonna
it
stay that way too.
a little low?
Ours is going up.
Yours going up.
Yeah.
Mm.
We've had a lot of rain and just south of here in the last few days. You're bound to be going up.
Yep, we're going up.
Yeah, it's going up here at the confluence too, at the Mississippi and Missouri confluence. And the Missouri is going up. Now they got all that rain out west.
Thank you for being so cheery, Colin.
Yeah, well, it's got some slack, so.
The only way I could enjoy that is if the water went the other way.
Colin wanted more snow this summer or winter.
Yeah,
I did. It's true. It's true. I miss the snow.
I know where you live.
Huh?
I know where you live.
Well, we got 9 inches in my yard, so my daughter was tickled pink. She could sled.
Mm-hmm. Only problem with 9 inches in my yard is my dogs are up to their neck.
Yeah, you could lose them.
Yep.
At least it didn't last long.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh. 70 degrees today.
Yes, it's very enjoyable looking at it out the window. Thank you for sharing that information with me.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking out a window as well, sort of. Now Mayor Gallagher is back. Hi, Mayor.
Howdy, howdy. Sorry, I was doing double duty. You guys had me over on another panel, but you got me prepared. I appreciate that.
How was it? How was the report card release?
I think it was fine. B- in ports and much worse for inland waterway infrastructure, which we are aware of. I sounded like a broken record. I kept going back to thanking the folks who are hosting us, ASCE, for their help on storm and pushing resilience revolving loan fund and SMART Act and talking about the things that we in the 10 years of our existence, but I think they're starting to be heard.
Good. Good. That was American Society of Civil Engineers report card release. First one since 2017, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, every 2 years, something like that.
Yeah. Was it every 4 years, Brant?
Yes, I believe it's every 4 years.
Okay. Yeah, I think we improved on ports a little bit.
Vastly. I mean,
Yeah.
vast improvement there. Representative Graves was on as well, so it was nice to see him again, and similar messaging, so.
Yeah.
And you opened for the transportation secretary.
We did. They didn't really have us do much for that, but he came on after us. Howdy, Senator.
Hey, how are you?
Wonderful.
There we go. All right, now I can do my stuff. Good afternoon.
Hey, Kimswick is good, Mayor?
Absolutely, we're hanging in there.
Good.
All right, this is Mayor Phil Stang from Kimswick, Missouri, and the MRCTI Missouri Chair. It's an honor to introduce our headline speaker from the Mississippi River Caucus, my senator, the Honorable Roy Blunt. Senator Blunt has worked hard to push for our priorities of the mayor along the Mississippi, including the pre-disaster grant program and the Marine Highway grant program.
Not sure if I just went off or not.
I can hear you.
Yeah, can you see me?
Yes.
Yes, now I can see you.
Okay, good.
Most recently, Senator Blunt joined the rest of the Mississippi River Caucus in supporting the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund. And although we haven't officially adopted it as policy yet for MRCTI, I want to say that I really like your STEP Act and think it is very much needed. Senator, the floor is yours.
Well, Mayor, great to be with you and all the mayors that are on this call from Missouri. And if there are any mayors anywhere else on the river, glad to be with them too. I think, you know, the river is always intriguing to me in how hard the river is to tame, but what an incredible asset it is. I read somewhere in the last year that there's more navigable river water in the Mississippi River Valley than the rest of the world put combined. And I've looked at that and I read it a couple of times and I thought about it and checked into it. And while there may not be more miles of river water, there's more miles of navigable water. We have this unbelievable, great built-in transportation system in what happens to also be the biggest piece of contiguous agricultural ground in the world. And the economic impact of that is great. The tourism impact of that over time has also been great. The travel impact of that has been great. And I think we're kind of returning to our sense of how important the rivers are and how important to manage both of the big rivers we have in our state. You know, we've been able to set aside specific money for the Missouri River for a number of years now to navigate that river. Senator Harkin and I formed the Missouri River Caucus, a Democrat from Iowa, a Republican from Missouri, about a decade ago. That's been a very worthwhile, maybe a worthwhile thing as we focus on the river and getting some specific money set aside for the river. I heard a mention of ports as I was getting on the call a minute ago. I do think that the country is taking the inland port structure a whole lot more serious than we did for some time. And it's one of the real ways we have a chance to compete. And you know, we hope, I hope that we transition here quickly to a infrastructure bill. Now, I'll be the first to admit that the infrastructure bill under both President Obama and President Trump seemed to be the great white whale. We were always chasing it. It was always the next thing we were going to get to. And while we sort of pieced our infrastructure efforts together, they never have really gotten to where we need them to be to take advantage of our biggest single location where all of us live. And that's our biggest economic competitor is competition advantage is location, you know, where the rivers come together, the highways come together, the rail systems come together, and what we need to do with that. And obviously, more focus on navigation and flood control helps river communities, in my view. And we want to look at any transportation infrastructure package in a way that continues to think about how we enhance our ability to use the inland port structure to be more competitive. And I think we can do that in ways that don't get in the way of the travel and tourism component of the river communities either. But certainly shipping, competition, whether it's agriculture or in an interest that people have to move more of their supply chain back to the United States. And when they do that, I think the river is a huge advantage in that discussion. If you're ever going to put anything on water, the sooner you can get it on water, the better off you are in terms of your ability to compete. And so I'm glad to be with you. I'd be glad to answer any questions about what's happening here. I'd also be glad to have any advice you have about what we need to be doing to be most helpful to the things that will help our river communities not just survive, but thrive.
Okay, well, thank you, Senator Blunt. We can move on into our discussion now for a moment with whatever time you have available. To engage meeting attendees need only raise their hand or push the chat. I'll get us started. Senator, I want to thank you again for helping us get the revolving loan fund passed into law. Now we're going to need your help as a senior appropriator to get it. We hope we can count on your support for full funding of RRF for fiscal year 2022.
And what are some of the arguments, Mayor, that I'm going to make when I'm talking about the reason for full funding? Give me some ideas from your community or others about the kinds of things that will happen with full funding of that wouldn't happen otherwise.
That's good, but I think
I don't need
I think Colin talked better to that than me. So, Colin, where'd he go?
Oh, right here. Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Senator. Good afternoon. Thanks so much.
Good to be with
you. You're my senator too. I'm joining you from St. Charles City, Missouri.
Good.
Yep. So some of the things that we're looking at are especially a lot of our cities and towns, especially in Missouri along the river, are going to always find it very difficult to get some of the larger FEMA grants, like the BRIC program. The amount of red tape and things that we have to muster in order to credibly apply for those larger mitigation programs is hard for a small town like Kimmswick or Canton or Louisiana, Missouri. But you know, this program, the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund, it's more of your ability to the merits of the project itself. You don't have to put together exactly a lot of reports. You don't have to get a lot of things passed. You don't have to go through a lot of red tape. What you have to do is present a project that you're going to be able to make good on the loan for, and the loan's only going to be 1.25%. So that enables a lot of our smaller towns that may never see a FEMA grant program because they just don't have the muster to apply for them. But this one is much easier. And as you know, you were such a great champion for us. It's going to be based on the merit of the project itself and in very, very flexible terms, meaning we can use the RRF money on a whole slew of different resilience items. Doesn't have to be flooding necessarily, but also could be schools or broadband or even chemical spills. So those are all called out in the legislation.
Got it. Okay, very good.
That he's gonna break ground on coming up.
I've already got, Colin,
Yes, sir.
we will have phase one of that port, that dock, in place by the end of this month.
Oh, great. Great. I'll get down to see it, Mayor.
Absolutely. So we'll have a little due for that.
Probably have time for one more question.
Thank
Anybody?
you. Thank you, Mayor Sting. I have a question for Senator Blunt. This is Mayor Bob Fox of Cape Girardeau. Hi, Senator.
How are you?
Thank you for being here today, and thanks for your leadership as co-chair of our caucus. We're hoping we could also secure your support for another proposal we're trying to get through Congress, and that's our Safeguarding the Mississippi River Together, our SMART Act, which will provide grants to our cities to transition and expand our economies. Here in Cape Girardeau, we're also beginning a feasibility study to build a marina and a river docking facility to attract outdoor recreation and the tourism industry. It'll help create new businesses and many new jobs in our area, and we'd like to work with your office on moving that proposal forward.
Sounds like something we want to be helpful with. I'll have Leslie Roan or Madison reach out to you, Mayor, and we will look at it and talk about it and see what we can do. And so look forward to that.
Senator,
And
I appreciate it.
For one more.
I do think the river is getting a lot more attention in the last 10 years than it got in the 10 or 20 years before. So maybe the last 20 years than it got in the 20 or 30 years before that. And I hope we can continue to have that attention on the river and the economic importance of the river, but also the incredible power of the river if you don't manage the river in the right way.
You're correct.
All right.
Senator, we had one more question from
Okay.
Mayor Grantham of Caruthersville, if you have a second.
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, Senator. How are you? This is Mayor Grantham from Caruthersville, Missouri. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I want to thank you for your tremendous leadership with us and providing so much for our corridor. Since you're a member of the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture and Rural Development, I'm hoping we can work with you to pass increases to certain critical programs within the USDA rural development that are now more important than ever due to the pandemic and the damage of the 2019 floods. Programs such as Reconnect, Rural Community Facilities, and the Emergency Community Water Assistance Grants are things that we can put to work in our rural towns right away, especially if we can make the Reconnect program permanent. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a good point, and permanent reconnect would have some real opportunities for us. We're going to look at the USDA programs. You know, there's a new secretary, but we've worked with him before as secretary. And matter of fact, I don't know that anybody's been Secretary of Agriculture longer than Secretary Vilsack will have been the first day he starts, that he has now started that another term. We'll look at those programs. And on the Reconnect program, Mayor, what are you thinking about there in terms of that being permanent?
Well, we have a lot of trouble with our broadband here. We are doing a Building Local Prosperity program with the University of Missouri. And we had a young man come and talk to us about the Pimscott Duckland electric company that are doing a lot of work in our area. And so we're trying to get our citizens to try inform them that, you know, that could be, we have even trouble on our main street. If I go out South Ward Avenue, I may lose complete connection, okay? It's not good. So we're really in trouble there.
Well, I hear you. And, you know, certainly on the rural broadband generally, and small town broadband being dependable and being connected to it, I think that's the difference in whether communities grow or not, that people, there are a lot of reasons people want to live in communities the size of many of our river communities, including Caruthersville, where, you know, church events still matter and school events still matter, and you may not know where every kid's name, but you probably know where most kids live. People would like that, but a lot of people would like that can't do it unless they can figure out a way to be adequately connected to the greater economy. And then now we've got telehealth and all the things that kind of emerged during the pandemic, as well as for many places in the country, at least the potential of what happens when you have virtual school. And so I think we really have a reason to accelerate the great efforts we've all been making anyway to get connected with broadband. But this is going to be a top priority and for me over this Congress, and look forward to working with you on it.
Hey, I'm going to announce that to my people in just a minute. I've got a meeting with them, and so I'm going to tell them, because they're gonna love that. Okay.
All right, we're going to do our best, and thank you for letting me join you. And I am going to have to go to another meeting now, but I think the river communities are at a moment of real decision making, which way these communities move, and we don't want them to move. You and I want them to move in the most positive direction possible. And I think just 2 or 3 key decisions on the intricate part of the transportation network, the connectedness with the rest of the world economically, and the impact that all has in an environment where world food needs are going to double between now and 2060. World food demand doubles quicker than that. And we're in a great place along the river to begin to be part of that incredible explosion in a good way, and that kind of commerce and opportunity. So thanks all of you for letting me be with you. Look forward to time together soon, and maybe it won't be too long before we can all get together as a group again in person, as opposed to this way. But this is certainly an easy way for us to connect, and I hope we can do it all. Thank you all.
Thanks, Roy. And the next time you're in the Kinswick area, I'll show you around the port, and we might stop off at the winery for a bit, you know?
That both sounds great, Mayor. Look forward to seeing you and doing that. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, I believe I'm supposed to go back to Mayor Bloom.
Thank you so much.
I don't have a fancy background like that.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Stang. We're about to enter, I believe, our next experience here. And we want to thank everyone for their participation. And we are now moving to have Mark Chambers, who is the Senior Director of the White House Office of Domestic Policy and Climate Change, with us. Welcome, Mr. Chambers.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me well?
We can. Let me add just a little bit more. We want to thank you for your participation this afternoon and for being our guest. Now, before joining the White House, Mark was the director of New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio's Sustainability Office. Originally from Maryland, we welcome Mr. Chambers to our Capitol meeting. As you're aware, Mr. Chambers, we worked with the America's All In event with Secretary Kerry last month to observe our re-entry back into the Paris Accord. In fact, MRCTI is one of the original founding organizations of We Are Still In, and Mayor Simmons now represents MRCTI on the America is All In Advisory Committee. Mayor Strickland, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Mayor Broome. And thank you, Mr. Chambers, for being with us today. We're glad you're here. As a side note, I have to say, I really like your Twitter handle, Grow a City. And I know you have a lot of experience with cities. And of course, you got a lot of city believers on this call. Now, we know you're limited for time, so I'll just preface the discussion with us so you know that we are supportive of the president's climate agenda. In fact, we want to be part of it if there is a seat at the table. We hope there is, because any climate platform for the United States needs Middle America as a partner. You know, like you, we support policies benefiting resiliency, job creation, and cleaner water. Because of the Mississippi River, our role carries with it a global community leverage. We believe that if Secretary Kerry can show climate works in our corridor, or he at work in our corridor, that will show the world that America is serious about securing trade through climate plan. We really appreciate your time and the importance of the work you're doing, and we would love to be your partner. The floor is yours, Mr. Chambers. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So many things. So first, of course, thank you, Strickland, as well as Mayor Broome for the intro. Colin, thank you for inviting me to talk today. You know, Mayor Strickland, there's a funny story around the Grow a City handle. It actually started with about, gosh, it's probably 15, 20 years ago, with a project that I called Grow a House, which is when I kind of built a house from scratch for me and for, well, my family wasn't there yet, but like eventually we all lived there. And so I always had this vision of growing a house and then, you know, growing a city. And so it's starting to kind of become something new now. So we got to come up with a new handle, but I'll think of it. But, you know, again, I want to thank you for having me here, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to not just talk, but to begin and launch, I think, a series of conversations. So to answer your question, like, is there a seat at the table? Absolutely. I think that, you know, one of the things that you kind of prefaced a little bit in my introduction is that, and you guys might not know this as much, but I'm new to federal government. You know, that the Biden administration is my first time in federal government. And for the last 12 plus years, I've worked for mayors. And so that I have a very special place in kind of understanding that even though I've led, you know, climate change efforts, it's been on behalf and with the support and a behest of mayors. And, you know, because mayors know how to get stuff done. Bottom line, and I don't think that people recognize that, you know, policy and climate change is not all about policy papers and these ambitious goals that are 40 years out. That's important, and the science matters, but, you know, so does figuring out how to saw cut, you know, like stormwater drains to make sure that, you know, we're not having combined sewer overflows when we have these huge rain events that seem to be happening every, you know, more and more frequently. Or this past summer, which was quite difficult, was delivering air conditioners to elderly residents who were doing their best to socially distance and trying to stay safe during the summer and quarantine. You know, it was very difficult, but it's like, that's mayors and cities and towns are where the rubber hits the road for all of this climate resilience and adaptation work. And so it's very important, I think, to be able to put a lens on this that is not just about the larger global movement, but about like where it actually interacts with service delivery and kind of protecting and looking after both constituents, residents, everyone on those lines. So and to be honest, I think that's kind of why I'm right. I think that they've been, you know, this administration, the president's been very intentional about building out a climate team that truly acknowledges and understands that we can strengthen the relationships between the federal government and cities, like the cities that are represented here on this call, and it's actually necessary if we're going to achieve all of our climate efforts and all of our resilience work and all of our clean energy goals. So I think that as we start to move forward and start to, I think, build out the framework for a lot of the policy work, that a lot of which you guys have probably seen in some of the executive orders that have come out, that's just the beginning. And the important part is to kind of recognize that you know, yeah, our, I guess when I think about it, it's like, it's important to think about the role that we can play in delivering services to cities and towns, but a lot of cities are doing amazing work already. And a lot of the work that's necessary is for us to be their champions and to make sure that we are telling those stories and making sure that both nationally and internationally, learning from different places of the country that are doing really well. You guys as stewards of the Mississippi River Corridor know a lot and can teach the rest of the country and a lot of other river communities around the world a lot about what can be done. And then hopefully in partnership over the next 4 years, we can also have some more incredible stories to tell around how we really build out a framework that makes sense for everyone. So I mean, I can go into talking about tons of different things, but to be honest, I came here to listen, and I came here to make sure that I understood what's important to you. And I think that being able to at least kick off this conversation in a way that understands that I kind of recognize that there's so much both at stake and so much potential, from a community that, bisects the entire country, that I think that we really have the ability to shape something really amazing and to kind of learn from each other. And for me, that starts with listening and starts to figuring out exactly where I can help my office and the office that I work with, the Council of Environmental Quality and the Domestic Policy Office, to be able to use the levers that we have to be helpful. So I think that the best thing for me is again to listen. Like, so if there are things that are particularly of import that you want us to talk to us about, if there are different sectors, if there's different components that we have the ability to look into further, or if I can connect you in ways to other both experts on the climate team, but also in federal government at large. I think that's also a role that I'd like to be able to play to make sure that your voice is heard, and that we're also quickly moving towards decarbonizing our economy, but doing it in a way that makes sure that everyone gets to thrive and benefit from it. So I'll stop there, just so I'm not rambling on and on, but I am here to talk with you guys, and I'd love to hear more.
Well, we thank you, Mark, and we do want to have an exchange with you in this process. That's one of the most profitable forms of communication is, listening and feedback and exchange. So we appreciate that. And we certainly are going to open the floor to questions. But let me start with a question. This morning we had the opportunity to hear from our former Congressman, Cedric Richmond, and we asked him to work with us towards being part of the April 22 Climate Summit. The summit's taking place on April 22nd. And Mayor Simpson of Cairo asked Senator Duckworth in her capacity on the Senate Climate Crisis Committee to work with her to ensure that our region is included in the nation's climate agenda. And so how do we, and you did allude to this in part of your comments, but could you connect us with the best way to engage your office and specifically Ms. McCarthy to make the Mississippi River Corridor part of the April 22nd summit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess number one, I have and will continue to report back on the conversations I've had with Colin up to this point, and also to elevate and make sure that Gina's aware of a lot of the interest that you have. I also think that a lot of the work is still being defined now, and so to the extent that we have these conversations and there's specifics around where you think the most important parts of that conversation are, I think that will also help. Apologies, there's a. Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. My parents like to call at all hours, so regardless of what's going on, apologies. And so So I would say that yes, I'm happy to connect, but I also think that sectors matter. So one of the kind of amazing things about what is being established now is that there is a desire to make sure that different parts of this climate work are being defined and pulled out in ways that are more thoughtful. So for example, you know, I'm an architect by background. That's my skill set, and so for the most part, the work I'm doing is really challenging and kind of pushing forward on the emissions that are responsible from our built environment, from buildings all across the country. There are colleagues of mine that are also working particularly on manufacturing, industrial side, on water, working on environmental justice, particularly in land use. So we're looking at this in a way in which there's probably multiple ways for you to plug in. And so I would just say that what's best would be to have a follow-up conversation where we can see which things are most important. And I also say that cities all around the country are also self-organizing and advocating in a lot of different ways around that summit. So I see that this moving and building and growing out. So I would also encourage you, and happy to do this, to also connect your cities to other cities around the country who are also want to have aligned activities during that time to make sure more voices are heard during that time. So I think it's a great idea, and I think it's important for us to kind of keep that conversation going.
Thank you very much. I want to tell you about one thing that we're working on that we think really fits the president's goals, particularly his 30 by 30 effort. Ducks Unlimited is headquartered here in Memphis. Tomorrow, our group here is going to be signing an agreement with them to deploy natural infrastructure, including conservation land throughout the Mississippi River corridor, to absorb disasters and provide habitat. This will not only add to the president's 30 by 30 goal, but it will also provide new assets to sequester carbon, thereby contributing to the plan for climate performance. So that's the kind of thing we think we can offer the discussion. Ducks Unlimited has really perfected this device, and we're going to try to implement it all the way up and down in many cities and states up and down the river. So that's the kind of thing we'd love to be able to plug in at some point, and like you said, share knowledge, learn from y'all, learn from others, and then share our experiences on how we can be successful.
Absolutely. That sounds very fascinating. One thing that I'll add to that, which I think is important and we don't often talk about enough, is that so data matters, right? So like and how we talk about, and not only how we talk about, how we quantify benefits in a lot of different ways. So one thing I'd be really interested to do, and we can follow up on this, is hear a little bit more around how they plan on quantifying some of the benefits that go along with that kind of sequester and different things. Not to change what's planned, but basically to say that, so now we can almost have an apples to apples thing across the board, so that when there are other people that are building on innovation like that, they know how to account for it in a way that we can all start to innovate on top of that based on the same type of language. I think that's often something that we miss the opportunity to talk openly about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you got to have data, you got to quantify it to really show the benefit. I'm not the one to answer that question, so I don't know if Colin knows. Now, Ducks Unlimited is participating in this call, but I think they're watching and not necessarily a participant right now.
We can follow up afterwards. That's fascinating.
That sounds good.
And Mark, to support what we're doing with Ducks Unlimited on the data side, is we're kicking off a study tomorrow, as a matter of fact, on studying the disaster resilience capacity of natural infrastructure in the entire Mississippi River corridor. So when it gets started, it'll actually be the largest footprint study of that kind going on right now in the nation. And that work is being done by 2 Degrees Adapt, One Architecture, Black & Veatch. Cargill is a supporter of that as well. We have a number of players and partners that are engaged in that work. And that that'll allow us to quantify and measure exactly where are the best places to implement this infrastructure and what's it going to do. We know it helps us. We got plenty of anecdotal data from 1993 forward that shows it helps our cities. But usually that anecdotal element is just for that area. We don't have a quantification at corridor scale. We don't know how one area impacts another's, and we haven't targeted exactly high repetitive loss regions, like mostly confluence areas where rivers meet. So the study will answer a lot of that for us, and we're excited to kick that off tomorrow.
I noticed they moved Mike Sertle from Ducks Unlimited to participant status, but I don't know if he's ready to say
There he
anything.
is.
He might not be at the camera.
Yeah, I don't know if they're ready to
Yeah.
speak on this
Yeah.
right now, but we're excited to be with them tomorrow.
Well, thank you for your interest, and we'll try to get you that information.
Yes, can you all hear me now?
We can hear you, Mike. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, I was I was in a muted mode, does not interrupt everyone. Yeah, I will talk to it a little bit. I oversee our program in Illinois. So a lot of the projects that have been mentioned here, things like Horseshoe Lake and Two Rivers National Wildlife Refuge, the Dogtooth Bend area down by Cairo. We are very, very excited, myself and all the other DU staff, to be signing the MOU tomorrow, and to look at bringing our engineering, our floodplain expertise to the table to work with MRCTI and all of you to start to look at real world solutions that address both flood concerns, but also property loss concerns, and how we can benefit wildlife and provide public recreation. So yes, very, very excited.
Thank you, Mike. This is Bob Gallagher. I'm the co-chair of the MRCTI, mayor of the Bettendorf, Iowa, where I-80 meets the river. For your thought process, Mr. Chambers, thank you so much for joining us. As we talk about measurement, there are many different scalable ways to do that, and we want to continue to look corridor wide. Not only will the deployment of the natural infrastructure reduce carbon emissions, but there are other things in the infrastructure world that will. For instance, I was on a panel today with the American Society of Civil Engineers, who just did their infrastructure report card. And while ports went up, the inland waterways are still not well regarded. And part of that issue is, as we continue to deal with the infrastructure plans, like the the antiquated lock and dam system, and move to container on barge and some of these other things that can help us to remove congestion from our highways and roads, that'll have a tremendous impact on carbon emissions as well. We can go to a more efficient barge as long as it gets to be more predictable through our lock and dam structures. There are so many things that we can do project-wise in conjunction with these natural infrastructure things and creation of marshes and wetlands as we do those hard infrastructure projects like the lock and dam system that will work in this climate realm as well. So making sure that we have appropriated buckets of money that understand how important it is to cross-pollinate, we can get so much more done with less, and we can further the agendas of delivery in commerce with the agenda in the climate realm. So those are some things to think about. Do we have mayors with other questions? I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Chambers.
No, I was going to say, while we're waiting for others too, I think that's great. And I think that's exactly the type of thinking that is necessary. The other part of this that is also, I think, very exciting about this time that we're in right now is that there is a lot of innovation that's happening that is building upon some of the other work that, and the other problem solving that's happening. So a lot of work, as you talk about transportation and shifting from one mode to another, there's a lot of work happening right now around electrifying a lot of transportation, and like, what does that mean and how can we do that more effectively? But when you start looking at shifting from road travel to river travel or nautical travel, like there's a lot of innovation happening around electrifying barges and boats and work as well. And so what's also exciting is that everyone can participate in the innovation around that as well. And I think that is also, when we look at the different kind of resources and money and technical assistance and different things, I'm also eager to kind of push everyone to learn from each other and figure out where there might be ways to embed into decisions now the ability to add things in the future. And so a lot of times that may end up being conduits for charging in the future that may not have an impact on costs now, but like might allow for these duct banks to be able to transfer electrons in a way that's more helpful later on. Like all these different pieces of us moving to a different place that is less problematic to like the environment around us, I think is going to be really exciting. And so that's part of why I think it's important for us to have these conversations, is that you might be solving for one problem and someone else might be solving for another, and being able to make sure that we're again, cross-pollinating, I think allows for so many different innovations that are not all, incredibly expensive. So that's, I'm just excited about it.
Good. I think you'll find as we continue to build our relationship, the mayors up and down the river are looking at it from many different perspectives, both sides of the aisle. We're boots on the ground, and we work together so well through the leadership of Colin and Brandt and the folks at the MRCTI to be problem solvers. And we may see some of those things that could help you in advancing your goals as well as the goals of other different silos in that cross-pollination effort. So I really appreciate the building of this relationship and the fact that we hope that we can continue these conversations with you. Other questions for Mr. Chambers before we let him go?
There's a question in the chat, Mayor Gallagher, or in the question and answer section. It says, to what extent does your office focus on policies aimed at building climate resilience and moving climate adaptation forward? This is a huge need in the Mississippi corridor.
I think that's front and center to the work that's in place. I mean, both kind of planning and how we're making decisions now that are dramatically reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and a lot of the work that we're doing, but also like the adaptation is and resilience work is 100% necessary now. And so it's not just in the Mississippi corridor, it's in corridors all across the country that there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of people out of work. And I think it's very important for us to do everything we can to fundamentally embed our work on climate with getting people back to work. I mean, one of the really exciting parts around the president's executive orders on climate, one of them is the creation of the Civilian Climate Corps, which is going to mobilize the next generation of conservation and resilience workers. Because you know as well as I do that it's one thing to have these projects, it's another thing to have people to do the work for the projects, right? And a lot of them, a lot of time, that skills training is something that is necessary because you just need more people. And so I think that's going to be a really exciting part as that gets up and running, to be able to help Americans all across the country be able to partake in a lot of the work, and the good paying jobs that come along with it for that exact type of thing. So I would say, just to answer the question, we are full front and center. That's why we're here, is to do the adaptation work, to do the resilience work, and to do the work around mitigation, which is what we called the work to stop the carbon emissions to begin with.
As they go hand in hand, think about this for us as we continue our partnership. We are 100 mayors strong, working together in the corridor, a corridor that has the experience of many types of different disasters from which we need to become more resilient. And we need to adapt moving forward, understanding that every dollar spent on resilience saves us more than $6 in the long run. We'd love to be your pilot project for whatever it is you want to unveil and roll out. We already have the infrastructure, and we have many different types of disasters from which we all suffer, not only is it floods, but hurricanes and tornadoes, earthquakes, anything that you can name that happens in another sector of our beautiful country happens in our corridor. And this would be a great opportunity with a ready-made structure for us to get some boots on the ground ready to go. If indeed that's something you'd like us to do, we'd love to help.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to have that conversation. I think that's exactly the type of kind of grit that is necessary right now. So good to hear.
Excellent. Well, we're happy to help. Any other questions? I don't see any more in the chat or in the question and answer.
You're good, Mayor Gallagher.
All right. So I want to thank you, Mr. Chambers, for joining us today. We appreciate your efforts and close coordination, especially as we move into the future. Our hopes for a continued relationship remain very strong. And as we've kind of pointed out, we've got some ideas on how that might be able to help with you and the administration. So this concludes our second session of our virtual Capitol meeting. We will now adjourn until tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock Central Time, at which point we mayors will host a press conference announcing our policy platform, the Plastic Pollution Initiative lunch, and the signing with Ducks Unlimited. We hope everybody can join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock. You can use the same log-on credentials you used this morning to rejoin us tomorrow. So thank you all, everybody who joined us today, and we'll see you back here in the morning. Again, Mr. Chambers, thank you. Excited about a continued relationship, and congratulations on your new position. It is heartwarming that you have spent lots of time working for cities, because I think that gives you an opportunity to know exactly how important it is that cities and mayors jump on board with you in this type of work. So God bless you and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, mayors, so much.
Thanks, everybody. Great job today.
See you tomorrow.